Number 10, her original costume. Black Widow's original costume before her black catsuit, but after her more casual spy in a dress look, was definitely not worthy of Natasha's fearsome presence. Originally in the comics, Black Widow was a villain, and this outfit made her look kinda like a C-class one at best. The one-piece bodysuit and mask I don't mind as much, though a small bodysuit does seem kinda impractical for a human who spies and likely doesn't want to expose skin to getting nicked or hurt or shot at. Still, the worst part of the look by far was the full body fishnet that she wore underneath. Obviously fishnet doesn't cover very much and it just looks gaudy, and that seems like something that would catch your eye as well, as opposed to lending to stealth. Add in her cape and her B earrings and W cape clasp and you've got one eyesore of a look. Thankfully, Black Widow would concede that she needed something way more durable and would move from this look to her more signature all black ensemble. Number 9, Hawkeye kills her. Really, just the Ultimate Universe has been pretty awful to Black Widow, but one of the worst moments for her here is when she is killed point blank by Hawkeye. Granted, at least she kinda deserved her death here, but did Black Widow deserve such a dark story in general? Probably not. Clint comes for revenge because here Natasha is a traitor who basically was responsible for the death of his family and his own capture besides. Escaping capture, he gets free and rushes to where Black Widow is being held as Tony already apprehended her. He then basically executes her while she is in custody at the hospital. It's all pretty dark and very much Ultimate Universe-esque, and not necessarily in the good way. And before we move on to our next spot, just a quick little reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. Number 8, guilt. One of the worst things to happen to Black Widow, both in the comics and in the MCU, seems to be her own actions. A lot of the time, all of that red in her ledger seems to be one of the biggest things when it comes to her own suffering. In the comics, Black Widow has even set out before on missions to atone for her past misdeeds and sins. But to her, I don't think really any of her actions, no matter how grand or how many of them, will ever really be great enough to let her forgive herself. She seems to struggle with the concepts of self-acceptance and self-forgiveness quite a lot. Perhaps this is what makes her character so relatable for so many of us, but this is also what makes a lot of her life as a hero feel pretty tragic. The fact that she is on what feels like a never-ending journey for atonement. Number 7, her relationship with Daredevil. I know there are lots of people that ship Black Widow and Daredevil heartily, and based on their stories in more modern comics, I get it. But if we go back into the dark history of their relationship in comics, it gets really weird. The moments from way back when Natasha and Matt were first dating did not age well, and just make Daredevil look like a creep and Black Widow kind of look like his sad doormat. There are actually a lot of things about Daredevil comics that are really, to me, just plain weird. From everyone constantly reminding Matt that he's blind to his extremely chauvinistic behavior towards Natasha. I also love that Natasha even calls him out for it, but then just still just goes along with it. Number 6, MCU death. A lot of people have criticized the treatment of Black Widow's character in general in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but one of the worst things was when Black Widow was killed off during Endgame. Black Widow went out nobly, of course, but everyone was left wondering why she had to be so permanently gone. Why was Black Widow the one we lost, huh? What's more, the worst part about this whole endeavor is that while Tony Stark got a big funeral and huge acknowledgement of his sacrifice by the end of the movie, hey, it feels as though Natasha's sacrifice has been all but forgotten at the end of that movie. The most she gets in her memory is angry Hulk throwing a bench and Hawkeye just looking real sad. Nice. Granted, it does seem more likely based on film rumors that it might actually not be the true end for Natasha, as there have been rumors that after her solo film, Scarlett Johansson will actually be making some kind of return as, I don't know, that character or a clone, but at this point, it's all still speculative, so I'm still pretty upset about her death.
Number 5, hashtag engaged. Spider-Man Homecoming was released in 2017 and directed by John Watts, and it's amazing. I mean, this version of Spider-Man, this film version, this is Spider-Man. The older Tom Holland gets, the more and more this dude is gonna become Spider-Man. He's gonna basically do what Robert Downey did with Iron Man. It just works. This is it. We found the casting for this character. Done. Good luck to anybody else who wants to replace these guys. So one thing I hated about Spider-Man Homecoming was the very end of the movie. So Tony has this plan to introduce the world to Spider-Man, the newest Avenger, even showing him this fancy new Iron Spider suit as part of the pitch. Peter Parker, being all coy and smart, thinks that it's just a test and politely declines the offer. He says he would rather be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man just to chill out, you know? So Tony reacts in a great way. He's all for it. He's like, yep, protect the little guys, I gotcha. And then after Peter walks away, we see Pepper Potts emerge from behind him, and in the background you can see all of these reporters and spectators. He really was planning on introducing a new Avenger. Also, after the events of Civil War, really? I always thought that was a weird time to be like, hey, remember on the news when this was a big deal? Well, here to introduce a high schooler with the ability to throw a bus, here's Spider-Man. He even comes with 4 metal arms and instant kill mode. Check it out. Not a great plan, no. So instead of introducing the new Avenger, he has to do something. I mean, those poor reporters, how are they ever gonna get over it? So he grabs an engagement ring and last second he proposes to Pepper Potts. Ah, damn. That's not a bad trick to have up your sleeve. Like, ah, damn, I forgot my school project. Maybe I'll just propose to somebody in class instead. That'll distract them. Number 4, address shoutout. If there's somebody that wants to kill you, odds are you're just gonna stay away from that person, right? Like, you don't just give your address out to the public, let alone, I don't know, a terrorist. So after Happy gets put in the hospital due to one of the Mandarin's attacks on the Chinese theater, Tony Stark decides he's got a few choice words for the man responsible, the Mandarin. Iron Man 3 of course didn't go so well with fans, given that the villain was just a fake out, and a fake out that people were actually really looking forward to seeing. I mean, the Mandarin's one of the coolest villains ever, and instead we got not the Mandarin. We got like a guy who turns red. But in his message to the Mandarin after visiting Happy in the hospital, Tony says how he's not afraid of the Mandarin, and he in fact should just die. Pal. Do you ever argue with somebody and then you take it like a step too far and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that? So Tony gives his address to everybody filming. There's a news crew, there are people on their phones. Like, dude, I get you're upset, but come on, use your smart billionaire head. So of course he gets attacked by the Mandarin because he's the Mandarin, and that's what villains do. They attack your Malibu mansions. What did you expect? And out of all of the suits Tony has access to, I'm talking his suit in the final battle for Avengers, he has the briefcase suit, the suitcase suit where he's like, you know, out of all these things, no, this guy gears up with a prototype suit. And of course he gets wrecked. That attack sets up the entire film. Could have easily been avoided if you just didn't give your address out on the news. Silly man. And number 3, Superior Iron Man. So we go now to issue 1 of Superior Iron Man. The issue itself starts off mirroring the tech in Iron Man 3 in a way. Tony can control his suit and fight inside of it, but he's not actually in the suit. He's actually laying in a pool, sipping on margaritas. So his new Extremis armor was fascinating. So much so that Tony released it as like the smartphone app. Now this app allowed people to change their bodies using this virus, becoming however they wanted. And it was great, but then Tony does the ultimate power move and says that the app was actually just a free trial, and in order to continue using it, you have to pay 100 smackaroos a day. Honestly, that's not a bad deal. I would pay that to become Iron Man, definitely. I'd be broke. You know what I would do? I would actually pay for the app, and then use the suit to rob banks, and then use that money to pay for the app. I'm a villain. I guess I just realized I'm definitely a villain. Just said it out loud, there we go. Number 2, Bad Armor. In the Age of X limited series released back in 2011, we find Tony Stark in a rather odd predicament. See, at this point in the series, issue 2 I believe this happens, Tony is infected with this virus that is bonding him to his suit. You ever get like a piece of your sweater stuck to an arm hair and you're like, oh god, what's going on? And then you pull it and you're like, whew, that was close. It's kind of like that, except, you know, way worse. He's even going by the name Steel Corpse, which, I mean, as far as names go, it's pretty good. It's pretty fitting. Now, at this point, he was a mutant killer. It's a long story, but basically when Iron Man went to stop killing these mutants, in like the turning point of the comic, his suit, which was now literally part of him, started to control him against his will. And it's super scary how it looks on the page. Like, he looks so different and sick and gruesome. His body's not doing well at all handling the merge. So his armor starts to take aim at a group of mutants against his will, and he freaks out, begging Captain America to save them in a rather dark way, if you know what I'm saying. So Cap then takes out Iron Man with a shot to the head. Nice move. A little late, I would have done it sooner in this series, but definitely a good call. And finally for number 1, Demon in a Bottle. So the classic storyline that was actually the center of attention for Iron Man 2 back in 2010. So in this movie we find Tony Stark, and at this point the arc reactor in his chest was powered with a palladium core. So time plus usage of the Iron Man suit equals poison. Not great. So we see Tony's life being ran down to the ground. We see his mental health start to decline, and at Tony's party, he's hammered. He's peeing in his suit, and then to see a drunk superhero like Tony Stark acting like that, it wasn't random. This idea didn't come out of nowhere. The idea was loosely based on the Demon in a Bottle storyline from the comics. See, this character arc begins with Iron Man issue 120. We see Tony just slamming drinks. The opening shot, we see like 3 mini bottles of gin, and then Tony orders more. And the flight attendant's like, hey, how about a magazine? Because it's the middle of the day. And Tony responds with, nope, I'll do another martini. She even tries to cut him off. She tries to cut off Tony Stark. You know how fat that tip would have been? She says, sir, you've had like 3 already. Are you sure? And he's like, yes, ma'am, I am. Stating that he's drinking for 2, the other, of course, being his Iron Man persona. That's a lovely sign right there. What happens when you have a superhero who loves slamming martinis? Well, you get Tony flying through the air drunk, spreading toxic fumes all over a crowd. The drunk tank himself even cheated on his girlfriend, Bethany. Not cool. The alcohol addiction was of course put to the side for the MCU storyline, thank God. Like imagine if Tony tried to snap his fingers but he was too drunk. He's like, and I'm so hungry. Can we go home please? Like I gotta eat junior chickens right now. Kicking off the list at number 10, smacked by Thanos. We got to see Captain America and many others get the beatdown of their lives in Avengers Infinity War. But in the comic, in Infinity Gauntlet, it was somehow even more brutal. Yet in part 4 of Jim Starlin's The Infinity Gauntlet, Thanos at one point weakens himself while maintaining the stones because he wanted to take on the Avengers in a more equal fight. All of this just to impress Death. So he makes himself weak and then fistfights them. It's crazy. So Captain America is leading the Avengers into battle, and at this point, everybody is getting hit. Cyclops gets his head stuck in a clear block of force. Vision gets his insides just torn out. And then Thanos sees Cap as having such an emotional outburst. And then after Thanos destroys Cap's shield, he gives him the mighty backhand of a lifetime, knocking him out cold. And before we continue on to number 9, guys, if you could just go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, because it really goes a long way for us here at the studio. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Number 9, he lost Bucky. Okay, 2005 was a wild time. We got to see Jason Todd return as the Red Hood, and Marvel had their own type of super sleeper assassin come back from the dead as well, Bucky Barnes. In 2005, Bucky Barnes returned, but of course he was never the same. Near the end of World War II, Bucky and Cap were trying to disarm a bomb on a plane while taking down Baron Zemo. The bomb went off, hurling Steve and Bucky into the freezing waters, and well, as for Cap, he came out of this pretty good. He remained frozen, just hanging out, and Bucky, he didn't end up so lucky. His body fell into the freezing waters, and at the time, a Soviet spy submarine was in the area crossing the English Channel. So they scooped him up, fixed the whole left arm situation, brainwashed him, and turned him into this brutal assassin. It's heartbreaking. See, he has all these incredible abilities that make him a fierce warrior, but he doesn't remember how he got them, making him this deadly assassin and a super crazy villain to handle. This is Steve's right-hand man. Every conflict that they go through is just painful. One of the biggest turning points of Marvel was the introduction of the Winter Soldier. This was a conflict that came to life on the big screen back in 2014 with the Winter Soldier, and we're kind of still seeing Bucky try and figure this life out. With the Falcon and the Winter Soldier coming next month on Disney Plus, we can see even more of what he has to go through post-Winter Soldier times. Number 8, Hail Hydra. This next one resulted in writer Nick Spencer getting death threats. That's right, so fans were mostly not okay with this one. Back in 2016, Captain America said 2 words that would throw every comic book fan for a loop: Hail Hydra. It all went down in 2017's Secret Wars, when Captain America's reality had been rewritten secretly by Kobik, who was a sentient cosmic cube acting under the influence of the Red Skull. So as a child, Steve was recruited and raised to believe in their ideology, which was the strong ruling for the weak, for the good of all. Now there's a pleasant nod to this in Avengers Endgame, of course, when the team goes back in time to the first Avengers plot. We see Steve get in the elevator to try and get the scepter, and then we see the whole Hydra/Shield elevator stocked full of guys. Now we don't know this at the time, but that's fully Hydra. But Steve knows this. So instead of beating everybody up and kicking ass in the elevator like he did in Winter Soldier, he just said, Hail Hydra. And then just like that, he walked out of the elevator with a smirk on his face. It was beautiful. Number 7, Roscoe Simons. Roscoe was a Captain America fan, as we all are, and he got the opportunity of a lifetime in Captain America issue 181. He proved himself more than capable to carry the shield after Cap had left it, and it was up to Sam Wilson to train Roscoe Simons. So Sam had this mindset. He was hopeful that Roscoe would see the real life dangers of actually wearing this suit. It wasn't just Halloween, you put on a suit, you whip a frisbee, and then you're like, cool, I got him. It was scary, it was hard, it was at a time in the government where it wasn't a good idea to be this type of character. And he was hoping that he would retire. But in issue 182, Sam tells Roscoe that he's gonna look after him. So Falcon did his best to protect the new hero, but in the very next issue, we see front and center the death of a hero. It was pretty brutal as well how Red Skull took him out. It was a very public way in order to warn others who want to step up to that same mantle. Now poor Roscoe, but also poor Sam Wilson. He told this guy he'd watch his back, and now he has his blood on his hands, and also he has his blood on his future suit, which is not ideal. Number 6. Lost a fight to Ant-Man. It was a great audition, but it will never happen again. Those are the words Sam Wilson says to Scott Lang when they meet for the second time in Captain America Civil War. The first time they met was when Scott was sent to the new Avengers facility by Hank Pym in the first Ant-Man movie. See, Scott wasn't aware that he was going there, but once he arrived, Sam Wilson was sure aware of his presence. Falcon demanded to know why he was there, and when Ant-Man said he needed to borrow the signal decoy, Falcon just wasn't buying it, and they went at it. And at one point, Sam pulled out guns and shot at Scott. That's how much he thought he was a spy, but Scott won, not by using the higher ground, but by using the smaller one. He shrunk down and got into Sam's jetpack, pulled some plugs, and then Sam fell down to the ground, letting the new Avenger finish his mission. So Sam called into Natasha and made it very clear that Steve never hears about this in the future. Don't worry, Sam, I think all is forgiven at this point.
Number 5. Depression. While the revelation of his mother's fate and the death of his father was hard, something else that Matt would inherit would also prove challenging for most of his life. That was Matt's own depression. Like his mother before him, Matt has also struggled with his own emotions and mental health throughout much of his life. We later learn that the struggle of depression is also seemingly Matt's every day. Depression isn't something that he can really escape, but the silver lining is, although he's felt the weight of it, he's also learned how to cope with it. Not necessarily recovering from it fully, but definitely finding a way to live life with his depression and at times kind of move through it, refusing to let it overwhelm him, even at times when, based on what was going on, this likely seemed or felt impossible for him. As a result, Daredevil as a hero likely possesses some of the strongest willpower throughout Marvel's characters. I think it goes like Doom and then Daredevil, with maybe 1 or 2 people in between them. I feel like if you're depressed every day and you're constantly struggling and being a superhero and dealing with all of the other, stuff in life, that's pretty impressive. You gotta have a strong will. Number 4. Shadowland. The Shadowland story was really brutal for Matt Murdock and also for readers and fans. DD ended up becoming the leader of the Hand, but it would later be revealed that he was actually not in control of himself during this time, as he was possessed by the Beast of the Hand, a demonic entity. Daredevil did a lot of awful things during this time, including killing Bullseye, building a mighty fortress known as Shadowland, and attempting to kill BFF Foggy. No, not Foggy. All in all, the whole event was a rough go for Daredevil, and by the end of it, he was forced to leave Hell's Kitchen and go on a journey of self-discovery as he tried to find his way back to his initially heroic path. Shadowland was rough overall. It's a rough time in Daredevil's story. Number 3. Marriage to Mila Donovan. So all in all, although Daredevil considered it in retrospect to be a mistake, I'm not trying to say that their whole marriage was awful, because that's not what happened. Matt and Mila had some good moments, and there was a time that they were both happy together, but ultimately their marriage ended up causing them both a lot of pain in the end overall. At one point, Mila herself didn't even believe that their marriage was ever real, convinced that Matt had manipulated and lied to her. She filed for an annulment, and it hurt Matt to receive the request and even have to consider that. However, Matt and Mila would make it past this and eventually end up back together, seemingly happy for a time. But her worry over Matt's safety would cause her to seek out the help of a therapist, who was secretly Mr. Fear in disguise. Oh goodness. Instead of helping Mila, Mr. Fear actually only made things worse for her, causing her to become more fearful and paranoid. Eventually, Mila did enough harm that she was arrested and considered criminally insane after she accidentally pushed someone into the path of a speeding train. Don't think Mila has ever recovered from all of that terrible stuff that happened to her. Alas. I mean, at least she's still alive, I guess? As we move on to the next points. Number 2. Death of Elektra. While she may have been returned to life later on, the death of Elektra, Matt's first love, still hit him hard. The two hadn't been together for some time, but had dated back in college before Elektra mysteriously disappeared. She resurfaced years later and was revealed to be an assassin, competing to become the Kingpin's #1 hitman. or hit woman, perhaps. Unfortunately, she was up against Bullseye, who decided to kill off his competition. He and Elektra had a dramatic fight that ended with an iconic panel showing her being stabbed through with her own sai by Bullseye, but only after he had already seemingly cut her throat by throwing a playing card at her, so don't forget that part. While Elektra and Daredevil weren't together at the time of her death, her fate at the hands of Bullseye still haunted Matt, and he probably still thinks back to that moment and is like, even though Elektra is alive now. Number 1. Death of Karen Page. Yeah, Daredevil loses a lot of people that he cares about. Honestly, it's no wonder he struggles with depression considering just how much loss he suffered in his life. I mean, that's gotta be really hard. Karen Page was another close person who became a victim and a target as a result of being so close to Matt, aka Daredevil. For many years, she was Daredevil's confidant, his on and off again girlfriend who knew of his secret identity. In fact, I believe Karen Page was one of the first people, don't quote me on this, but I think she was one of the first people to actually find out about Matt's secret identity as Daredevil, so yeah. Eventually, her closeness to Matt put her on a very dangerous collision course with one of his arch nemeses, Bullseye. As Bullseye, who pretty much never misses, targeted Daredevil with his own billy club, Karen jumped in front of the projectile to save Matt, and in so doing was killed as the billy club penetrated her heart.
Starting off at number 10, he destroyed Johannesburg. With many comic book stories to pick from, these events can get a little confusing. To start off the list, we go back now to the events of Avengers Age of Ultron, released back in 2015. Now, before Wanda Maximoff was an Avenger, she was getting some dirty work done to help Ultron. Okay, this included playing mind games with the Avengers. So Wanda gets to Banner and he hulks out big time. This time it's very uncontrollable. Now at this point in the MCU, the Hulk has a handle on his Hulk mode, kind of, like he's got it down. After Avengers 1, he was like, I'm always angry, and then he's like standing in the circle with them. He knows what he's doing to some degree, and with the help of Black Widow, she can tippity tap his palm and make him chill out. Black Widow was out of commish this time due to the same mind trick from Wanda, so he ends up going crazy in Johannesburg, and it takes Iron Man and his new Veronica #Hulkbuster armor to come in and knock some sense into him, literally. Now, of course, Wanda was in his head, but none of the other Avengers reacted this way. They just went to places in their mind that brought them a lot of distraught, and they couldn't even fight anymore. They were leveled. So, the Hulk made matters worse, of course, resorting to punching and being, well, a monster. Number 9. He broke Las Vegas. The Hulk was assisting S.H.I.E.L.D. on a mission to clear out some Hydra weapons in the Vegas desert, and after a gamma bomb blew up in his face, he becomes this dark, menacing gray Hulk and begins to terrorize Vegas. The Fantastic Four's Thing comes to help, telling Johnny Storm that monsters understand monsters. Pretty valid point. So Ben goes up to Banner and lays it down. He explains that he knows he doesn't want to hurt anybody else and that he's just messed up, that's all. He continues to offer to help Banner, treatment for the radiation gamma even. And then Hulk responds with, she's dead. Betty Banner is dead and you can't do anything about it. You killed her. And then, bah, he goes crazy. So the people in Vegas see this monster battle happening on the news and they love it? Yeah, they start placing bets. Some guy's like, $50 on the Hulk. Another guy's like, $50,000 on the Hulk. It's wild. Check out Fantastic Four issue 533 for yourself to see how the Green Giant got through that. Number 8. He left the Avengers. Okay, again, we go back to Age of Ultron. So after the final battle on Sokovia, the Hulk decides to just leave. He hops in the Quinjet after tossing Ultron out and decides to just let it keep flying. He ended up going pretty far considering we don't see him at all during the Civil War storyline. It's not until Thor Ragnarok that we meet Banner again, and he has no idea where he is or how long he's been there. Without the help of Black Widow, he can't transform back into his regular, nice Banner body. I have to include this because this is a decision the Hulk made, not Banner. There's a difference. He himself decided that he was just gonna go. Maybe he was done with hurting people. It's actually a massive character arc that people didn't really look into enough. Like everybody came out of the theater like, whoa, Vision and Wanda, can't believe it. Scepter was actually no way, dude. Hey guys, where's the Hulk? Where did he go? That's the Hulk. Of course he came to the aid in Thor Ragnarok, but maybe if he hadn't gone at all, he wouldn't have fought Thanos when he did, huh? Therefore not losing and becoming unable to get mean and green come Infinity War, when you really needed a Hulk. He could have figured it out on Earth. I mean, he figures out the perfect balance by Endgame, so I feel like if he just stuck around, he would have gotten to that point faster. Also, don't leave the Avengers, man. You need the science bros, always. Number 7. Madison Square Up Garden. This next one is pretty wild. So Thor Ragnarok was loosely based off of the Planet Hulk storyline. I say loosely because that story didn't end up going so well. Like the comic book story didn't end well. So on Sakaar, the rocket that he arrived in ended up blowing to smithereens, causing some casualties that left Hulk a little distraught. So what did he do? He heads back to Earth, pissed, and thus begins the World War Hulk storyline. He just murks everybody, all the heroes that Earth has come to love, just in the path of this very angry beast. It's not a good situation. He locks the Illuminati in Madison Square Garden and then makes them fight to the death. I mean, once you spend enough time on Sakaar, I guess it becomes second nature to just battle it out. In the first issue of this series, you see Iron Man in his Hulkbuster armor, and he uses repulsors to accelerate his punch, which is something Iron Man can be seen doing in the MCU. I like when they keep small details like that make these series memorable and awesome, especially the artwork. It looks really cool, and then they insert those into the MCU version of that story. See, even Hulk's design on Sakaar, they really wanted to treat the audience with the same elements that we loved already from the comic book. So make sure if you haven't already to grab all 5 issues of the 2007 World War Hulk storyline, because it's actually a treat and you can plow through it in like a day. Number 6, Old Man Logan. Now, we were all delighted to see an R-rated Wolverine story finally on the big screen with the release of Logan back in 2017. This was loosely based on the story Old Man Logan, written by Mark Millar and Steve McNiven. The film had Logan in the spotlight alongside Charles Xavier and Caliban, and is one of my favorite movies ever. Not even superhero movies, like just as a movie in general. Hugh Jackman is chef's kiss, so good. But in the comics, the story has moments that are even darker than what we saw, believe it or not. Like how about a Hulk gang, for starters? That's right, so in this storyline we find the Hulk as one of the few remaining superheroes on Earth. Now at this point, Banner had decided to breed with somebody like him. Maybe just a little bit too much like him. Like, I don't know, say, his cousin? Yeah, his cousin. So him and Jennifer Walters had an offspring and referred to them all as Hulk Gang, which is a sick nickname for your little ones. Now, if you think that's already twisted and wild, the Hulk Gang actually killed Logan's family. Why? Well, they were bored, of course. What else do you do when you're bored? Do you watch these videos, or do you just murder Wolverine's family? Today you did the right choice. So Wolverine went to exchange a few words with the man, of course, and Hulk ended up swallowing Wolverine whole. What a jerk. Don't worry though, Wolverine used his claws to get out in a rather messy way, killing Papa Banner in the process.
Number 5, no one to help. This point has some more specific spoilers for the latest episode of WandaVision, episode 6. So if you haven't gotten there yet, you maybe want to skip this one if you want to avoid spoilers, or if you haven't seen it but you're like, I'm living through the spoilers, man, which is fine. In the latest episode of WandaVision, it's Halloween in Westview as we proceed along our sitcom timeline into the world of basically kind of a Malcolm in the Middle inspired era, which aired actually in the 2000s, despite this episode having a very 90s feel, and despite that series having a 90s feel. Trying to solve the mystery of what's really going on in Westview, Vision lies to Wanda about not being able to join her and the kids trick-or-treating, due to being on duty for Neighborhood Watch. Now in reality, he actually spends the evening investigating Westview and eventually finds the town's reality warping barrier, which he attempts to cross, not knowing that this will likely end up killing him. As outside of this altered reality, which it's hinted at is numbered as 2800 in the MCU, despite the fact that I think that number's already taken in the comics, Vision is in fact dead. When he moves to leave the town, we watch as he struggles against the magical barrier, which obviously very much wants to keep him within town limits. Sword watches as he attempts to move into their world, seeing him fall to pieces, slowly dissolving in front of them. And as a handcuffed Darcy Lewis shouts for them to do something, like help this man. But that doesn't end up happening. They just run. In the end, it's up to Wanda to save the day when Billy alerts her that he senses that his dad is in danger. Wiccan to the rescue. Number 4, manipulated into being a villain. I really do feel for Vision. Most of the most terrible things that have happened to him in the comics or otherwise are honestly my worst nightmare, which is being controlled by other people. In this case, we're talking about when he was sent in to kill the Avengers and seemingly in some kind of murderous trance. Once the team attempted to reason with him, it became apparent that this synthozoid enemy wasn't all he appeared to be, and in fact that he might not truly be acting of his own volition. In the end, Vision would end up becoming an ally to the Avengers, fighting against his instincts to do them harm. They'd actually help him by deprogramming his murderous urges, and he would eventually go on to join the Avengers outright, fighting many times against his creator and father, Ultron. Many times. Ultron never stays dead. Number 3, infected with a Hydra virus. During the events of Secret Empire, Steve Rogers would end up having his whole life history rewritten and be revealed as a long-time sleeper agent for Hydra. Our heroes would, however, find out too late about Rogers' true allegiances, and so Captain America would become Captain Hydra, or Hydra Supreme, and would take over the United States of America for the glory of Hydra. But he would also end up recruiting some of Earth's mightiest heroes besides, including Scarlet Witch and Vision. But how did he convince them to join the side of evil? Well, he didn't. For Wanda, Hydra actually awoke Chthon within her in order to take control of her body and make use of her powers. And if you want to learn more about Chthon and that whole thing, you can check out the worst things that happened to Wanda's list, where we talk about that a bit more. For Vision, being a synthezoid, they merely infected him with a virus. That was easy. And although Vision tried to fight it, he remained unable to break free and fight against Hydra until near the end of the event. Like the second last issue, I believe, in the main one. Secret Empire number 9. Number 2, death. While those who only knew Vision from the MCU might think of his tear-jerking demise in Endgame, comic fans know that a fate worse than being destroyed, at least the first time around, awaited him in the comics. Here, instead of Wanda destroying him at his own request, urging her on with words of affirmation and love, Vision ends up being controlled against his will by her, which leads to him ending up in a direct conflict that he doesn't actually want any part of, which ultimately leads to his very gruesome death. Not only does he melt and vomit up silver pods, which transform into Ultron bots, but overkill comes into play when She-Hulk then decides to go into a rage and ends up tearing him down the middle, which is a pretty epic and permanent kind of on-panel death. Although, of course, even if you get ripped down the middle, that's probably not the end of you, because comics. Vision is still a synthetic being, and he can be recreated. So don't worry, he would be rebuilt, and he would return once more. But what a death to come back from. Number 1, weaponized. During the events of Avengers Disassembled, which led right into House of M, Wanda ended up suffering from a mental break, and as such ended up turning on her fellow Avengers. You'd think Vision, being one of the Avengers who, is married to Wanda, would be safe, but no. Wanda ended up not only getting him killed, but it was the way in which she did it, I think, that just really cut him deep. She didn't just put him in the right places to be torn apart by She-Hulk, but she actually turned him into a weapon to be used against his friends and teammates, the Avengers. Vision actually warned them when he came to them that he was no longer in control of his body before vomiting up those pods, which turned into Ultron robot drones, who then attacked the Avengers after their mansion had already been attacked. This was just a real bad day all around for the whole team. When Vision returned to life and Wanda much later came to ask for forgiveness, it would actually be this memory that would prevent him from being able to forgive his wife, Scarlet Witch. He was like, I can forgive the fact that you had a mental break, but you literally turned me against my friends and made me hurt them, and some of them died. Pretty crazy.
Kicking off the list at number 10, making weapons. Now, of course, we see Tony Stark as the genius billionaire playboy philanthropist, but how exactly did Tony end up with all that cash money? Well, in the MCU, it is shown that Tony is running his father's company, of course being Stark Industries. Founded in 1940 by, of course, Howard Stark, the company is the best at what it does, that being selling innovative weapons to the United States Armed Forces. Ooh, now after being kidnapped by the 10 Rings and seen the damage that his weapons cause in an up-close and very personal way, he of course seized all manufacturing of the weapons division. But the damage is done. It is later revealed in Avengers Age of Ultron that one of his Stark Industries manufactured missiles killed Wanda and Pietro Maximoff's parents. Not cool, Stark. Not cool. Number 9, Hulk's field trip. In the MCU, the Hulk leaves the Avengers and the planet for that matter. See, after tossing Ultron out of the Quinjet, the Hulk lets himself fly away on autopilot, perhaps feeling that he's done too much damage and that his presence is causing more chaos than comfort. Well, in the comics, that basically happens, but it's done with haste, and it's done by none other than our very own Iron Man. So the Incredible Hulk issue 92, titled Planet Hulk, Starts off with Reed Richards and Tony Stark talking to a monitor, and that monitor is sending footage to the Hulk in the ship. They explain to the Hulk their trick, which was to send the Hulk away while he was already in space for a previous mission with Fury. They say they've picked his destination very carefully, which is this lush planet full of vegetation and game, no intelligent life forms. Sounds pretty easy breezy for a creature like that, only of course he ends up on Sakaar, which is not that planet. It's very different. He's actually forced to become a gladiator and fight for his life. Now, the Hulk is out of the picture, right? Mission accomplished, we did it. Pew, gone. Get that guy out of here. Wrong. Sakaar ends up being destroyed, and the Hulk, well, he's got some names to scratch off his get even list. So he heads back to Earth to find the Illuminati and seek revenge, including on Tony Stark. Number 8, he faked his own death. Iron Man issue 284 has quite an interesting cover. It shows Tony Stark wearing a suit, but like a boring kind of suit, in a casket. Ugh. And the text at the bottom of the page reads, "The death of Anthony Stark." It shows all these superheroes mourning the loss of their friend and fellow Avenger. Even Dr. Doom is like, ah yes, let us drink to the memory of a worthy opponent. Like, you know you're sick if Dr. Doom is like, yeah, cheers, I'll drink to you, that's cool. And to make things even crazier, he writes a note to Rhodey that says, "This keycard will give you full access to the entire complex. Take this CD-ROM disc to my office and play it on the AV system." Wow, nothing says futurist rich billionaire like, take this CD. It'll help you. Okay, you have to like wipe it off first. Put it in. So he puts it in and clicks play, and it is pretty awesome. It shows Stark explaining that somebody has to carry on for him. The world needs an Iron Man. And bam, you see a suit made just for Rhodey. What a moment. Tony continues to say that Iron Man was the greatest thing that he's ever invented, and he doesn't want it to die with him. Fair. I mean, it's pretty overwhelming for him though. I mean, all that responsibility of being the new Iron Man, plus mourning your best friend, plus figuring out how to run a company, that's a lot of. So finally, he suits up and it's epic. Iron Man lives again, but it turns out Tony wasn't actually dead at all, rather just under cryogenic stasis until a scientist sorted out his spinal software problems. Ha! Gotti!
Number 7, a man out of time. Like Captain America, Bucky is also considered a man out of time. While he was born in 1925, he now lives in the present day, meaning that many of his friends from his days when he was a camp mascot during the war times and pal of Captain America, or if we're talking the MCU serving in the war, are now all dead. Not only that, but like Steve, he's had to adapt to the progress of the modern day, adapting to living in a very different world from the one that he was born into. Granted, this may have been easier for Bucky considering he was at least around, at least periodically, throughout the passing years, and as such has at least seen some of the changes as they've happened. But of course, this timelessness could also be hard for him to adjust to, especially considering how much of the time in his life he spent being controlled by others and not really experiencing the world from his own point of view, but being manipulated by others to see it how they wanted him to see it. Number 6, death of Captain America. The supposed death. Anyways, Steve would later of course return, but yes, at the time, people thought that Steve Rogers was dead after he was shot through what looked to be the neck, yikes, and then later the gut. And yeah, anyways, he's fine, it's all fine. Bucky himself was initially believed to be the culprit, even by Falcon, and the two had a quick scuffle before Bucky explained he'd rather take his own life first before allowing himself to ever harm Steve. Aww. Bucky also then revealed that he was talking to the Nick Fury on comms and was only in the building that the sniper had sniped from because he was attempting to apprehend the person responsible, which then led to Falcon and Bucky teaming up to do so.
Number 5, Midnight Sun. First appearing in Special Marvel Edition issue 16, Midnight Sun aka Minai was the only survivor after Shang-Chi's father had wiped out a British village. Seeing the rage in the young boy's eyes, he decided to raise the boy alongside Shang-Chi, so naturally the two became besties. They became best friends, they worked together and grew up together. After Shang-Chi realized what his life was becoming, after he left, his father sent Midnight to take him out. How twisted is that? His own family, basically. So they fought an emotional battle, but in the end, Midnight fell off a crane and in turn broke his neck. Doesn't anybody listen to Edna Mode? No capes! No capes, or else you'll just Gwen Stacy yourself. Number 4, Humbug. Another ally, another fateful day. Humbug, aka Buchanan Mitty, first appeared in Web of Spider-Man issue 19. He began his days as a Spider-Man villain, which I honestly love, really sticking to the theme of growing up on the wrong side of the track, but after being defeated by Spider-Man so many times, he was like, you know what, screw it, if you can't beat him, join him. So he and Shang-Chi were part of the 2007 Heroes for Hire, and he ends up getting infected by the Brood Queen, and in turn he's forced to betray his teammates. So Shang-Chi was forced to, take him down. And he also does so by ripping off his head. I feel like there's a more peaceful way to do it, but who am I to ask? I mean, look at this. Number 3, Spider Island. A Spider-Man villain going good. We love to see it. Any big change to a character is always fun, good, bad, or downright weird. Like for example, in 2011's Spider Island series, Shang-Chi himself gets infected with the spider virus, and he changes quite a bit. He gains similar powers to Spider-Man, which is cool off the bat, but he also starts having nightmares where he turns into a literal arachnid and subsequently attacks innocent civilians. In Spider Island Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, Shang-Chi is recruited to take on the Bride of Nine Spiders, who at the time was holding Iron Fist captive. While he's trying to handle this sticky situation, he mutates even more and his nightmare becomes a reality. The spider's instincts were trying to take over his mind and spirit, but luckily for Iron Fist and his strong will, the spider look didn't last too long. Too close for comfort though, way too close to turning into a spider. Any of those I gotta include, that's a nightmare. Number 2, Domino. Shang-Chi has many lessons to teach, so it's not bizarre that heroes often go to him to sharpen up their spirit or fighting skills. One of those heroes was Domino. In Domino issue 4, released back in 2018, the pair are sparring, they're learning, they're bonding, and then when they're later on in a nightclub, they're kissing. Nice. That's when trouble likes to make its grand, horribly timed entrance. Shang-Chi helps Domino gain her lost knowledge of her powers, so she was able to now save the night single-handedly and take down these enemies. But when Domino finally comes face to face with the one who sent said enemies, Topaz, she can't resist her teacher's advice and she kills them. Shang-Chi was disappointed on many levels, so much so that he had to break off the relationship, both romantic and professional. And finally, number 1, his dated comic book origins. Yeah, we have to talk about the differences between the early comics and what's being represented on screen now, because they're completely opposite, much different. Because if you're reading old Shang-Chi comics to have a better understanding on who his father is and what you're going into for the film, you're gonna see some stereotypical, offensive aged content. His father was originally referred to as Fu Manchu in the comics, who Marvel brought out in 1973. Marvel at the time was trying to make bank by capitalizing off popular martial art films and themes. It was discontinued later on in 1983, but this is offensive content that they now have to use to branch off into other side stories like Avengers and stuff like that. Shang-Chi star Simu Liu himself has opened up recently about the role and its historical impact. He says, when you look at the character of Shang-Chi through the comic books going back to the 70s and the 80s, the fact that he existed and the fact that he was an Asian character was amazing. But at the same time, there are aspects of that portrayal of him that maybe could feel a little stereotypical. So when we first started to map out who this character was and who his journey was going to be over the course of this film, we were all very sensitive to not have to go into that stereotypical territory. Now, director Destin Daniel Cretton tried to wipe out as many negative elements as he could, and in the movie there's a powerful moment where the characters are reflecting on the Mandarin from Iron Man 3, and the way that they mention it, well, the way they retcon it, really, is done in a smart and, dare I say, charming way. Number 10, Wanda's mind games. With many comics to pick and choose all these events from, we gotta start somewhere where most of us kinda remember, just to get the gears turning. So we go back now to 2015, Avengers Age of Ultron. Now before Wanda Maximoff was an Avenger, she was getting her evil days under her belt. She was Team Hydra, or rather Team Ultron in this case. This included playing mind tricks with the Avengers. Wanda got to Banner and he hulked out, and this time it was bad. It ended very badly. Now at this point in the MCU, the Hulk had a handle on his angry side. It was controllable in a way. All he needed was for Black Widow to tap her fingers on his big old green palm and then say, oh, the sun's getting low, you're good, we're all good. Welcome back, Banner, let's go home. But she wasn't able to do that this time because of Wanda's mind tricks. She was also under her hex. Meanwhile, Ultron's getting his cold hands on some vibranium and Bruce is going nuts. He ends up going absolutely crazy, and it takes Iron Man and his new Veronica armor, the Hulkbuster armor, he has to knock some senses back into him. Literally, he punches him so hard that he goes to sleep. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a like, that would be great. And while you're there, you might as well just subscribe. I mean, you're already watching these videos, just a little tap-tap-a-roo, and then our face will pop into your YouTube. You don't have to do anything. We'll just show up. So thank you so much for your support. Now let's get right back into this video. Number 9, Soul Survivor. Hulk the End, written by Peter David, released in 2002, is a one-shot that takes place in a world where nobody is left but Bruce Banner. In a world probably resembling our near future following a war that ended in nuclear fallout, the issue starts with Banner vlogging. Yeah, just kind of like this in a way. He's accompanied by a vidbot, this floating camera that always hovers 10 feet away from him. It was assigned to confirm and record the fate of the final humans on Earth. Seeing as Banner is the last one and he's not gonna die, it's just gonna follow him around until the end of time. Banner doesn't mind it, but Hulk hates it. God, that would be so annoying. It's like TMZ, but in the future. It's It's coming. So Banner just absorbs all this nuclear energy, and now he walks about all these wastelands that were once home. He's not totally alone though. No, he comes across these giant mutated cockroaches. And it's a really dark and cold ending for Bruce. The Hulk just wants to be the biggest, baddest creature ever and rule a planet, and Banner just wants to pass away. He's done. He wants nothing to do with this. It goes deep. Also, not to mention that the Hulk often has his body destroyed and devoured by these massive mutant cockroaches. He grows them back afterwards because of the increased gamma, but man, that's gotta suck. Number 8, a perfect pair. While Logan broke R-rated records back in 2017, it introduced us to what a darker side to the superhero life may just look like. And in the Old Man Logan storyline, we find the Hulk as one of the few remaining superheroes on Earth. Now at this point, Banner had decided to breed with somebody like him, maybe a bit too much like him. Like say, I don't know, his cousin Jennifer Walters? Yeah, they had offsprings and they referred to them as Hulk Gang. Now, if you think that's crazy enough, the Hulk Gang was actually responsible for the death of Logan's family. Just cause, well, you know, Hulk Gang gets bored. Hulk Gang wants to fight, that's it. So Wolverine went to exchange a few words with the green guy and the Hulk ended up swallowing Wolverine whole. Yum. Now, it sounds like the Hulk won, but that's not the case in this list. Things are gonna get a little bit different. Wolverine then used his claws to get out in a rather messy way. That's why you don't mess with Logan, Banner, come on. Number 7, kicked out by the Illuminati. When you have this massive green monster that likes to smash buildings and rip people apart, you gotta ask yourself, what do we really do with this guy if things stop working out? Where do we put something like that? Well, you kick him out. Well, rather, you kick him off planet. There's an idea. In Incredible Hulk issue 9, we see this. We see Fury send the Green Goliath out into space for a mission. He was originally sent to destroy the God's Eye, which is a rogue satellite, but then when the dust and wires settle, Hulk gets ready to come back to Earth. Only the shuttle goes a different way. When asked what if the Hulk comes back, Fury responds with, well, we'll deal with it. Well, he didn't return yet, I'll get into that later. But where he did end up, thanks to Fury, was Sakaar. And thus begins the Planet Hulk storyline. Number 6, Horseman of the Apocalypse. War Hulk. Yes, this guy's great. We gotta talk about him. In X-Men Apocalypse, we caught a glimpse of the Horseman. We have Apocalypse surrounding himself with the likes of Storm, Cyclops, Gambit, and Archangel before going to Magneto himself. But what if he recruited the Hulk in this movie? What if we saw that? What would that look like? What if these superhero properties were all under one roof? Well, that's what happens in the Onslaught storyline. We pick up right after the Hulk and Banner split into 2 separate units, and they're on different Earths. So the angry green one ended up being recruited to serve as the Horseman War, thus giving us War Hulk. This version of the Hulk is just a treat. He's even more intimidating and powerful with Apocalypse's upgrade. Even Apocalypse had to put a limit on his powers. That's how you know it's real.
Number 5, used as a pawn in the Civil War. This is more exclusive to the movies, as Bucky didn't play quite as active a role in the first Civil War itself in the comics, but Winter Soldier was a huge part of the reason Iron Man and Captain America came to blows in the MCU's Civil War. Winter Soldier was revealed to be an assassin who was actually Captain America's brainwashed former BFF, James Buchanan Barnes. Gasp! Barnes was framed for the explosive attack on the Vienna International Center during the signing of the Sokovia Accords by Helmut Zemo to create a rift between the supers. Barnes was free and was seeking to learn more of his true past, but Zemo also reactivated his programming to take hold of the Winter Soldier once more so that he could use him to tear apart the Avengers and turn them against one another, especially after he revealed that the Winter Soldier was actually the one responsible for killing Tony's parents. Number 4, Frozen. Like Cap, Bucky Barnes was also frozen, being plunged into frozen waters and later retrieved by a Soviet submarine. Being frozen not only doesn't sound pleasant, because, you know, it's cold and uncomfortable and it hurts, but also it sounds pretty deadly. Bucky was lucky he survived, actually. In fact, the scientists that were to study him weren't even sure that it would be possible to revive him, and after studying him for 2 weeks without finding any traces of the super soldier serum that they had been looking for and hoping to find in his blood, they decided to put him back on ice. Bucky was put into stasis mode for 9 years before he would be revived again so that he could be transformed and weaponized. Number 3, Brainwashed. Bucky was believed dead after he went missing in action. In reality, we later learned that while he had lost his arm in the incident that people believed had killed him, Bucky himself had actually survived. Unfortunately, it was the Soviet Union who had found him and took him in. Keeping his discovery a secret, they brainwashed Barnes, making him loathe the West, turning him into a cyborg, giving him a cybernetic arm in place of the one that he'd lost, and began training him to turn him into their very own weapon and assassin. Number 2, Recaptured. The Winter Soldier, it should be noted, has escaped his captors in the past, but sadly, due to having his brains kinda scrambled, was never able to free himself fully due to the fact that he found himself confused without his handlers and lost. After the assassination of Senator Harry Baxter, the Winter Soldier missed making his extraction point and instead disappeared, going off the grid. Unfortunately for him, without his puppet masters controlling him, he didn't really know where to turn or what to do, and he ended up being recaptured by them shortly thereafter, eventually being located in New York and then taken back in. They decided that his return to America must have triggered something in him, wiped his brain, and were careful to note in his file that missions that would take him to the USA should be avoided in the future. Number 1. Used as a deadly weapon. In the MCU and in the comics, the Winter Soldier is brainwashed and programmed to be an assassin and a weapon, which is probably why he and Black Widow get along so well in the comics and even end up together romantically now and then. They both understand what it's like to be made into a monster, to be manipulated into doing evil deeds that they probably ordinarily wouldn't have done otherwise, but that they still obviously carry a lot of guilt about. The Winter Soldier was used to take out a ton of targets over the years, including Howard Stark and Maria Stark in the MCU, and in the comics, Nomad, Wolverine's love Itsu Akihiro, and President John F. Kennedy, to name a few.
Kicking off the list at number 10. His childhood. One of the origin stories for the twins involves them being experimented on from Loki's scepter. Another one of those origins is when they were raised by a cow. Yep, you heard me, I said a cow. Bova Ayrshire was one of the few new men who stayed behind after her creator left to go back to space. So basically, she's this evolved cow created by the High Evolutionary as one of his new men. Now these animals that are given humanoid form and a pretty smart brain to go along with as well, their purpose was to be this nurse or caretaker for other new men and the Knights of Wundagore. Then a pregnant Magda Lensher came along the Citadel after leaving her husband and had Wanda and Pietro and left them with the new nice cow lady. Now eventually Bova gave up the twins to the Maximoffs who lived down the mountain, and even Miss America and the Wizard declined the twins. So nobody wanted these poor twins. So right from the beginning, you know it's gonna be a rough one. And before we continue on to number 9, guys, if you haven't already, could you please go down and give us a thumbs up on this video, because those likes really do us wonders for our channel. Thank you so much for the support. Now back to some Quicksilver. Number 9, genetic experiment. When they were just kids, Pietro and Wanda Maximoff also had a tragic origin in the MCU. The twins, just at age 10, were in their apartment building in Sokovia when a bomb collapsed the building. Now this was the reason their parents had passed away, and then the second shell hit, however, but it didn't explode. Rather, it left the twins to sit there and stare at it, horrified that at any second it could go off, with the word Stark on the side of the shell as well. Very important. They grew up with a different mindset towards the Avengers, and this led to them being experimented on by Baron von Strucker. This is also where their powers come from. Now this is something that is slowly coming back to light in the MCU. Now with WandaVision's ominous commercials that keep popping up, many fans have suggested that they are hints at her past traumas, and the commercial with the toaster with the blinking red light could be a reference to when the twins were waiting for the bomb to go off when they were kids. I suppose it's not very easy to forget something like that growing up. Now with the last 2 episodes just around the corner, we finally get to see what's going on in that magical mutant brainverse. Number 8, forced to join the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Pietro follows his twin sister Wanda everywhere. He is extremely protective, and if she wants to join a Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, well, I guess he has to come along for the trip to make sure everything goes well. I guess. Since their first appearance in X-Men issue 4, Wanda felt like she owed Magneto because he saved their lives. But Quicksilver can't really disagree and leave her, no way. So he's like, whatever, screw it, I'll join as well. Although he makes it very clear where he stands with their ideas. They didn't do much with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, or at least Quicksilver tried not to do much. Like when Magneto wanted to nuke a country, Quicksilver steps in and opposes him. Number 7, depressed. In the Son of M storyline, Quicksilver is not having an easy go. See, he fell into a deep depression after losing his powers and his sister and his reputation all at the same time, which I'll get into a little bit later. So while walking around the city, opposed to his normal blink and you'll miss him speed, he came across some thugs. And when he tried to help out, naturally, his powers weren't there to be relied on, so he got knocked to the ground in one punch. And just then, Spider-Man comes in to save the day. He webs everybody up, and then he noticed that there was just one guy missing from the initial count. So he grabbed and webbed up Pietro as he was trying to jump off a building. Spider-Man isn't happy with him at this point either. His son is no longer alive, and he can't bury him because, well, he never existed, thanks to Pietro's bright idea. So he tries to jump again off the building. This time he succeeds in hitting the ground. Now luckily he was saved, but this is just still not a great time for Pietro. Probably one of the worst times. Number 6, Age of Ultron sacrifice. When the twins were introduced in the MCU, it was during Avengers Age of Ultron, when Baron von Strucker had used Loki's scepter to experiment on the Maximoff twins, resulting in one becoming a witch and the other being super fast. Now apparently he's not as fast as we all thought, because when it came down to getting Hawkeye and the daughter of a Sokovian villager to safety, he was just a little bit too slow. He thought it was a better idea to run in front of the bullets and take them all rather than, just zip them to safety. It didn't help that 1 year earlier we saw it in theaters, Evan Peters' version of Quicksilver in X-Men Days of Futures Past, and he was having a great time. He was pushing bullets out of the way with ease, he was making guards punch each other, he was trying out soup while he was doing his job. It seemed like a breeze, and he was rocking out to some music the entire time as well. But then Joss Whedon came in and decided to not make him as fast or powerful as that Quicksilver that we all kind of got used to, and then we see Aaron Taylor Johnson as Quicksilver die in just one movie, just like that. He's like, hey, nice to meet you. I'm Aaron Taylor John. Okay, and I'm out. Awesome. See you guys. Have a great set. Cheers. Number 5. William Burnside. William Burnside, who had changed his name to Steve Rogers and even got work done on his face to match the look. He ended up developing another Captain America serum, and he and his buddy Jack tried to be the new Bucky and Cap. So they got enhanced abilities and they took down Red Skull. They did some pretty good work as a team. The only thing was, a year later, things started to go a little bit south. They started to become paranoid schizophrenics, so the government put them in cryogenic suspension. He went from being Captain America to being the villain, just like that. So William and his Bucky Barnes sidekick, Jack Monroe, both were in custody of Dr. Faustus, who brainwashed William to become the Grand Director, the leader of the hate group called the National Force. Number 4. 404. Cap not found. In Captain America issue 404, we see Steve Rogers squaring up against werewolves. Yeah, what a sight to see. You heard me correctly. I said werewolves. The story known as Children of the Night runs from issue 403 to 405. And during this time, Captain America is fighting off Starksboro werewolves. And then when Nightshade tries to inject Wolverine with her wolf serum, his healing factor keeps counteracting him. So Druid mesmerized him with serums too. Then the next issue, we see front and center Cap Wolf. Pretty hard to forget. So now he's a werewolf and he has faint memories of Steve Rogers. So, of course, as you would expect, it's a pretty messy good time. Number 3, Civil War. Captain America Civil War was released in 2016, directed by the Russo brothers, and the whole movie, like the comic, is superhero politics. If you're a superhero, you have to register. You can't just be out filming yourself doing super TikToks and then you end up accidentally exploding a school. It's just not gonna fly anymore. And in the movie, it's Wanda Maximoff who kickstarts the Sokovia Accords, forcing Tony to side with the government as he feels responsible for Charles Spencer, among many others' deaths, with all the events that unfold with the Age of Ultron stuff. So Steve wants to protect Bucky this whole time, and of course, freedom throughout the team is encouraged. Now, eventually, due to Baron Zemo's work, he gets Tony in the same room as Steve, and we see footage of a brainwashed Bucky kill Tony's parents. The next 10 minutes are filled with Steve having to fight off Tony in order to save his best friend. And it's truly heartbreaking, and it all ends with Steve sticking the shield in Tony's chest, and as he carries away a broken down Winter Soldier, Tony says to him the shield does not belong to him, belongs to his father. And that's the last time he sees the shield and Tony Stark, so it all goes downhill for Cap for quite a while after this point. Number 2. Stuck in Dimension Z. In the comic storyline Castaway in Dimension Z, Captain America ends up getting stuck in this land created by Arnim Zola, and he's in there for 12 years. That's some Black Mirror type torture. That's like crazy. So during the 12 years, Steve raised a boy named Ian, who's a kid he rescued from Zola as his own. So the whole thing is that Steve has to return to Earth soon before this implant on his torso that's combined with the virus of Zola's consciousness takes over his mind. Not a great scenario. Also, ouch, that doesn't look too comfortable of a procedure. It's one of the more brutal body injuries, and of course the whole being trapped for 12 years element, that just adds to this already horrible nightmare. And finally, number 1. Shot by Sharon Carter. We go back now to the Civil War comic book event where Captain America was killed by his girlfriend Sharon Carter. Yeah, so after Crossbones sniped him, Agent 13, who at the time was Cap's girlfriend, delivered the final bullet from a much closer range. Well, it turns out it wasn't Sharon who was doing the work, really. The classic brainwashing made this defeat happen. Dr. Faustus. Okay, this causes a whole chain of events. For starters, Bucky decides he should then kill Iron Man after this, blaming him for the death of Steve Rogers. And then also Falcon ends up going after his own lead, he just leaves. And now Tony ended up showing Bucky the letter Cap wrote about how he should be the next Captain America. And Bucky agrees to take the spot only if he can operate solo. No government government, no big brother watching, just let me do my job, move out of the way, you guys suck. To think all this came to a climax after Steve's girlfriend was the one to deliver that final blow just adds insult to injury.
Number 10, being named traitor. As awful as this one is, it ranks a little lower on our list because, well, Wanda kind of deserved this one. After the events of House of M, Wanda was seen as one of the biggest mutant traitors around, still being believed at this point to be a mutant. Oddly enough, Scarlet Witch was one of the few prominent mutants in comics who has never been part of the X-Men team, and was really only an Avenger. If you're wondering why that is, a big part of it in the later years has to do with mutants hating her due to the fact that she basically wiped them from existence with her wish of no more mutants, which we now refer to as decimation. Well, that and she was initially too busy serving on her father's villainous team of mutants, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Still, although she did earn the title traitor, much of what has happened as a result of House of M happened because of basically how harshly people were treating Wanda. So, although she earned the title traitor, it still feels a little harsh to say that she entirely deserved it. I've always thought of Wanda as more of a misguided villain when she plays that role, as opposed to a true and sincere villain in the comics. Number 9. Cast as a villain. To expand on our previous point a bit more, a few of the worst things that have happened to Scarlet Witch usually involve her being cast in some kind of villainous role, despite the fact that she is truly a hero when it all comes down to it. Scarlet Witch only ever wants to do what's best, and usually it's some kind of outward manipulation or force that turns her momentarily evil, or causes her to break down and commit some kind of heinous action. It does make for some pretty interesting stories, but it's pretty awful the number of times and how severely Scarlet Witch has been used in this way by others, and when it comes to storytelling. Number 8, betrayed by her fiance. Remember when Wanda was about to marry Dr. Doom, and then it was implied that he really only wanted to be with her because he wanted to take her power from her? Granted, it seemed like he also wanted to do so to help her and help the world, but of course, it's still Doom, so you can bet that ego and selfishness were a big part of the reasoning behind this plot as well. Scarlet Witch no longer remembered who she was when her reincarnated son and member of the Young Avengers, Wiccan, came to find her. All she knew was that she loved Victor Von Doom and was ready to marry him, despite the fact that he had kind of manipulated her. Her love was real, but the backstory that she believed she belonged to wasn't. Wanda ended up spurned and mistreated by Doom even after the truth came out, and she still tried to help him. And before we move on to this next point, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you are enjoying it. It really does help us out, I promise. Number 7, being named pretender. What could be worse than being referred to as a traitor? Well, how about when Scarlet Witch was referred to as an imposter? This was the new label she was given after it was revealed that she was not actually a mutant, but had been led to believe that she was one for most of her life, due to the High Evolutionary disguising her and her twin brother as both mutants after experimenting on them, and apparently giving them powers himself. During the Dawn of X relaunch in an issue of X-Men, we actually see stories being told of Scarlet Witch where young mutants are taught to refer to her as a pretender, someone who posed as a mutant but was not one and could not be trusted. Seems a little unfair considering that Wanda herself did not know her true origin until much later in life. She wasn't lying, she had been manipulated into believing she was truly a mutant and Magneto's daughter. Number 6, death of her family. Even in the MCU, Wanda has a tragic origin story. In the cinematic universe, she and her brother Pietro were orphaned at a young age after they managed to survive an attack that collapsed their apartment. Their parents were killed in the explosion that decimated their home, but they survived after a second missile landed but did not explode. However, this experience would go on to haunt them for the rest of their days, with the name on the missile being burned into their memories for years to come. And that name, of course, was Stark, which is why when we first meet the Maximoff twins in Age of Ultron, they are enemies and not allies of the Avengers.
Number 5. Marvel zombies. If there's one thing we know now in 2021, it's that a virus can spread pretty damn fast. Hence why I'm in my closet instead of in the studio. We're trying our best here to keep clean and keep things moving, but this world makes it hard to do so because of this virus. And in a world where we're trying to slow that spread speed down at all costs, a guy like Quicksilver would be the opposite when it comes to help. So in Marvel Zombies, Quicksilver is actually part of the group sent to Earth to battle these zombies, but when he comes across Scarlet Witch in danger, he runs over to help her out, only to find out it's actually Mystique in disguise, an infected Mystique in disguise. And then it's over just like that. She bites him, turning turning the fastest guy in the world into a zombie. And then he uses his incredible speed to turn everybody all around the world into zombies super fast. He's actually the sole reason it became unstoppable. So let's keep that Quicksilver out of this world. Stay in 616. Go, do your thing, have fun, but just don't come into this one. Don't come into 2021. We don't want that. Number 4, tried to heal mutants. So after the House of M incident, Pietro tried desperately to bring his powers back, so he snuck into the Terrigen Mist chamber in attempts to fix himself, and while he was there, he stole the pieces of Terrigen and exposed them to his daughter Luna in order to give her powers. Now Pietro thinks this is the best idea ever and that he's solved it. So he opens a clinic in Mutant Town to restore everybody's powers, and this resulted in many losing their lives due to the powers of the Terrigen Mists. And Pietro had to live with that on top of everything else that he already had to live with. The guy just can't catch a break. Number 3, too close for comfort. We go now to the Ultimate X-Men series. Okay, so since the twins were a big deal in the Brotherhood, they were very dedicated to the cause. And when it comes to the Ultimates, they got a little too dedicated to said cause. In 2001, the Ultimate pair is when things got a little weird in the comics. So one of the Ultimates front cover made readers do a double take with the duo side by side, hand in hand, with their fingers interlocked. Not even like this, like how Friends do it. It's like, you know. Yeah, the writers decided to give them a romantic relationship, you know, just to mix it up a little bit. Why not? They were always pretty close from their first issue. I mean, even Pietro told Toad that he was chewing too loud in front of his sister, so that was fine. But then it's when this came into the picture, things got weird. When Mark Miller brought them over to the Ultimates, it got a little crazy, and he was pretty defensive about Wanda to Captain America because, well, Cap was suggesting Wanda wears less revealing clothes to make an example, all because Captain America was suggesting that Wanda was a little bit scandally clad for the job. But when Quicksilver backs her up, it's more of a romantic way, which I feel like we could all have gotten without, you know, we don't want to see this version of Quicksilver, I don't think. Bring back the zombie one. I mean, anything's better than this weird thing. Even Captain America's face in that comic is like, oh. Now this also happened to end with Quicksilver unable to catch bullets fired at Wanda, and then one of those bullets ripped through his hand, taking out his lover slash sister. I mean, sure, that's one way to write somebody out of a relationship. Number 2, he lost his powers. When Wanda lost control of her powers during the House of M storyline, she was taken in by Magneto, who had asked Xavier for his help. So the Avengers and the X-Men met up to try and figure out a solution here. So at this meeting, they had talked about ending Wanda's life in order to ensure nobody else gets hurt or wiped out. So Quicksilver heard about this idea and ran to tell Magneto, but Magneto even thought, you know, maybe they're right. Maybe this is the best case. So Quicksilver went and convinced Wanda to use her powers in tandem with Xavier's telepathy to warp reality and create this new world where everybody is happy. This world being led by Magneto, with the twins literally being royalty. This world eventually started crumbling when Layla Miller used her powers and several heroes began remembering real life. They believed Magneto to be responsible, but they ended up tracking it down to Quicksilver and how it was his idea in the first place for Wanda to do this. So Magneto lashes out at the twin and Wanda restored reality, but this time with most of the mutants depowered, including her brother Quicksilver. And finally, number 1, dead and back again. In that House of M storyline, we see a mentally unstable Wanda Maximoff, and she created this new world where mutants are now the main bread and butter, and humans are the minority. Magneto, upon first realizing how this happened, blames Quicksilver for convincing Wanda to change reality. So he lashed out and crushes Quicksilver with the body of a Sentinel. Now he did this to get back at Pietro for abusing his dream, and then Scarlet Witch showed up and quickly revived her brother. But the fact that Magneto chose to strike down his own son, I mean, that idea lasts forever, no matter which reality. Number 10, one less eye. That's right, kicking off the list at number 10, we have a Spider-Man moment that gives me goosebumps every time I see it. We start now with Spider-Man, The Other, Evolve or Die, where we see Spider-Man get his eye ripped out. Yeah, Morlun put Spider-Man through quite the battle, but ultimately it ended with his eye being a midnight snack. Spider-Man even compared being hit by Morlun to being hit by the Incredible Hulk, saying how he's never been hit so hard in his life. He has no idea it's about to get so much worse. And before we continue, if you guys haven't done so already, please make sure to go ahead and give us a like, because it helps us out a bunch here at the studio. It's this one. Thanks a lot. Okay, now back to Peter Parker's awful life. Number 9, Man Spider. We've all wished at some point or another that we could have Spider-Man's powers. I mean, the wall crawling alone I would take. So useful. But what if you got more than you bargained for power-wise? Well, in Spider-Man Disassembled, we see this in a pretty gross way. Peter starts to become an actual spider, starting with growing an extra set of peepers. Yeah, so that's disgusting. But wait, there's more. He ends up becoming an actual spider. Yeah, so after being injected with this goop from the Spider Queen, not only does he grow some extra eyes, but he also gives birth to another Peter Parker. Yeah, you heard me correctly. So out comes Peter, and he's the same Peter Parker as before, but a little stronger, with maybe a hint of PTSD sprinkled in there. But that's not particularly new to Peter. Bonus points to Peter also for attending a wedding with the 2 extra eyes and not being noticed. Gotta love Star Trek themed weddings. Get away with everything. Number 8, Venom. Making its debut in Amazing Spider-Man 299. Next up on the list, we have the introduction of Venom. Venom is a symbiote from the Clintar race, and after making its way to Earth, it eventually wound up in the hands of course, Spider-Man. So this dark symbiote started to make Spider-Man's life better. I mean, he got a cool haircut, started standing up for himself, and the suit made him stronger. It just felt better. But this didn't last too long because the symbiote found its ideal host shortly after Peter ripped it off, and that being Edward Brock. Eddie had visited Our Lady of Saints Church to beg God for forgiveness before ending his own life. And then this alien symbiote bonded with him mentally and physically. Like I said, at this time Peter was there trying to get rid of the symbiote because it was doing more bad than good in his life. Now because it had originally bonded with Spider-Man, he basically is another Spider-Man, kind of. He gets the same powers Spidey used and also some of the same memories. It's actually why Eddie Brock knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Fun little fact. This ended up creating one of Spider-Man's best villains, and we get to see Tom Hardy reprise the role of Venom in the not so near future. Number 7, Doc Swap. The Dying Wish storyline begins in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 698. Peter gets a priority call from the Avengers, and when he meets them at the raft, Cap and the team are waiting. He tells Peter an old enemy of his is not looking too shabby, and he probably won't make it. Peter knows off the bat already that it's Doc Ock. He just knows it somehow. Incredible. So he asks everybody for a moment alone, just them two. So everybody leaves, and that's when Doc Ock starts saying some really weird stuff. He's like, Peter Parker, but I'm Peter Parker. And then Spider-Man responds with even more confusing dialogue. He's like, nope, not anymore. From now on, I'm Spider-Man. And readers are like, what's going on right now? Did I miss a page? What's happening? This is by far one of the worst days for Peter because now he's trapped in Doc's old decaying body, waiting as the hours go by to literally die, while Doc Ock spends a night or two in Peter's advanced, healthier body. Number 6, Spider-Man, Look Who's Home. Beginning with Amazing Spider-Man 365, Peter discovers that his parents, who have been dead for quite some time, are back. Nice. And he believes it for a hot minute. And by hot minute, I mean this goes on for like 20 issues. That's wild. Aunt May gets a private investigator because she feels like something is just not quite right about this. Peter, on the other hand, feels so comfortable that he decides to tell his parents, who have been in a Russian camp for 20 years, sure, that he is in fact Spider-Man. This guy's spilling huge secrets already. Okay, this is odd. And then in issue 388, we learn that they're actually robots. Nice one, Chameleon. You fooled us again. He's so good with his robots. Number 5, Nightmare's Mind Games. We go now to the Incredible Hulk issue 299. So after the Avengers and everybody decided, hey, the Hulk can finally control himself, let's be nice and maybe make a statue for the guy. He earned it. Earth's mightiest heroes. We love this guy. This is the best. And then in comes the villain Nightmare, just to ruin the day for everybody involved. He taps into Banner's subconscious and then makes him resort back to the monstrous, uncontrollable ways that he used to be. Again, kind of like when Wanda toyed with him in Age of Ultron, except this time he had a nice handy statue to break over his friends' heads instead, He grabs a statue that was made for him and then he tosses it right at Thor. The Hulk even goes after Banner's girlfriend, Kate Waynesboro, so surely this is the day the Hulk never wished happened, so we had to include it. Number 4, Train of Emotions. Not all of these outbursts are necessarily the Hulk's fault. Sometimes it's the humans or other evil villains that are involved that just use him as a vessel. He's forced to live with a good amount of trauma, so much so that he's easily triggered by humans and their machines, like trains, for example. In the Incredible Hulk issue 122, the Hulk has a moment where he kind of destroys an entire locomotive. Hear me out, Hulk is still the victim in this situation. Now the thing is, no passengers were on the train. Great, lucky, awesome. But before he lashed out, he explained how these machines are always hurting the Hulk, or they carry soldiers to where the Hulk is hiding. So he's used to humans wanting to hurt him or do tests on him. So much so that just the sight of the train upsets our man. Now imagine if there were people on that train. They would think that it's all his fault, when in actuality it's just the government scaring him. I don't know, maybe stop launching missiles at him. He might trust you. Just an idea. Number 3, Sent to Space. Again. This time it wasn't Director Fury, no. This time it happened in Amazing Spider-Man issue 328. The Hulk gets launched into space, but not in a fancy ship, and not for a fancy mission, but because Spider-Man was the current Captain Universe host, and the Hulk simply got in his way. Peter Parker obtained these new powers. He can now control web lines through willpower alone, and the dude can straight up fly. This is a great day for Peter, but it's about to become way more interesting. In comes the Hulk, ready to smash for bucks, as he puts it. Well, Peter and his new powers have got some showing off to do. After a brief exchange of words and punches, Peter finishes the battle by punching the Hulk into space. And the Hulk has accepted defeat. He thinks this is the end. He's like, wow, just like the Beatles, here comes the sun. Look at me, defeated by something I can't even punch. How tragic. And then Spider-Man swoops up, grabs him, and pulls him back down to Earth. Close one. Number 2, the other snap. In the series Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect, we meet the alternate dark future version of the Hulk. His name was the Maestro. He made his first appearance in a vision back in Incredible Hulk Volume 2, Issue 401. But the Maestro is the main antagonist in this story. Now, it takes place about 100 or so years in the future after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction, similar to Hulk the End, similar vibes. Now, the Maestro had been absorbing all this nuclear radiation this whole time, and he ended up becoming the strongest thing on the planet. He had these massive increases in strength and anger, plus he had the brains of Banner, so arguably he's unstoppable. While the two beasts are scrapping it out, the Hulk helps some bystanders out when a building almost crushes them. Now, while this is happening and he's distracted, in comes Maestro and snaps the Hulk's neck. I mean, that would suck any day of the week, but a future version of yourself doing it, I mean, that just adds insult to injury. And finally, number 1, punched into retirement. Thor Ragnarok ended with the Asgardians drifting off into space. Surtur had just laid waste to Asgard in order to defeat Hela, and like Odin himself said, Asgard is not a place, it's a people. And these people are about to run into a bigger, badder ship very shortly. Avengers Infinity War opens with the same ship being taken over by Thanos and the Black Order. It starts off with Ebony Maw. He's giving a nice speech to a bunch of people who are dead and can't even hear the speech. And meanwhile, Thanos is rolling back his shoulders. He's already obtained the power gem at this point, and he knows the Space Stone is on this ship. But the Hulk comes out for one last swing. He comes out beast mode and starts smashing Thanos. Now, for a moment, we think that the Hulk has got him. For a moment. And then Thanos, without the use of the Power Stone, beats up the Hulk so hard that he doesn't come out in the entire movie. This guy punched him in the neck so hard, he was like, okay, I'm done. I'm retired. I'm definitely not coming out. See you in 5 years.
Number 10, Uncle Ben. I figured we'd kick this list off with a fresh, tragic reminder of how Spider-Man came to be in the first place. I'm really glad the MCU didn't make us sit through this scene again. In Spider-Man's first comic book appearance, Amazing Fantasy issue 15, Peter's life changes a lot in those 35 pages. He gets bitten by a radioactive spider, giving him life-changing, incredible abilities. He makes some cash, taking down some wrestlers. He literally gets scouted by a TV producer after just one gig. He learns how to shoot webs. He makes a sweet outfit, makes a sweet appearance on a sweet TV show. This guy's literally offered movie roles, interviews, tons of money, and Peter at this point is now just cocky as hell. He's like, hey, I call my agent, boys, I'm busy. And then a thief runs by and he doesn't do a single thing about it because he's through being pushed around. Okay, great. Well, you know the drill. That same thief was the guy who ended up taking Uncle Ben's life. You played yourself, Pete. Number 9, armed and dangerous. In The Amazing Spider-Man issue 100, we find Peter on the streets, webbing up some bad guys, just a usual Thursday night. Now at this point, he's getting tired of New Yorkers looking at him like he's the criminal. He's kind of done being with Spider-Man, so he wants to hang up the spandex and settle down with Gwen Stacy. Now in order for this to happen, Peter needs to get rid of Spider-Man completely. And so he begins working on a serum that will strip him of his powers. He doesn't even test it out either. He just mixes it up and then gulp right down the hatch. Okay, he's brave. Whatever happens, I did it for you, Gwen. I wonder if that includes growing 4 extra arms. Yeah, those back massages just got way better in the Parker household. It's a funny couple of issues. I mean, some panels with Peter having extra naked arms in the frame, it does look a little bit odd. Only after making a new serum with Morbius's blood did Peter go back to normal. Number 8, One More Day. This 4-parter began back in 2007 in Amazing Spider-Man issue 544, and instead of Peter dealing with thugs or giant lizards, he's now dealing with the devil, Mephisto. Now we thought he was the one pulling the strings in WandaVision, and some still believe that he's pretending to be Doctor Strange in the No Way Home trailer, some being me, perhaps, I'll never tell. And it's because of this comic that makes us think this stuff. This takes place after Civil War, right after Spider-Man reveals his identity to the public, so now villains are going after him. So when a bullet strikes Aunt May instead of Peter, he feels guilty beyond imagination. So this looks like a job for the devil. Mephisto appears in the form of a young girl and lures Spider-Man away to offer him a deal. Mephisto tells Peter that he can save Aunt May, but the payment also has to be pretty high caliber. He doesn't want Peter's soul or anything like that. Instead, he wants his marriage. So they agree as long as Peter's secret identity becomes a secret again. So right before Mephisto alters reality, he tells the couple that the young girl that he appeared as was actually their future daughter, adding insult to injury. Peter wakes up the next day alone with Aunt May alive, score, and the world doesn't know who Spider-Man is. I think this is a win, I think it's a loss, I'm not sure what to call this, but either way, my heart hurts. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to give us a thumbs up, you know the drill. If you're loving this content, or if you want a part 2, hit that thumbs up, comment down below, give us all the love, and then we'll give it all back. You guys are amazing. Now back to this list. And number 7, he created Ultron. Ultron can't see the difference between saving the world and destroying it. Where do you think he gets that? That line is said by Wanda Maximoff in Avengers Age of Ultron. So Tony has created some amazing stuff. All of his suits, his innovative tech. Barf? Barf? That's the greatest thing. This dude knows what he's doing. But what if he created a supervillain? Ooh. So we find Tony and Bruce working on Ultron, right? Or just the idea at this point, rather. See, Tony had this idea since Avengers 1 that if he could create a suit of armor around the world, it would be a safer place, or rather create a robot that kicks ass, essentially. Something that just takes care of threats while the Avengers, I don't know, read a book, relax for once in their lives. Of course, one of the main elements helping them achieve this goal is the return of Loki's scepter. They think by studying the central power unit of the scepter, which ended up being the Mind Stone, one of the 6 Infinity Stones, they can finally solve this puzzle and be safe. Tony ends up accidentally infusing the consciousness from the Mind Stone into this evil, jealous killer bot that mirrors many aspects of Tony Stark. So Ultron immediately starts to learn about what he is and who the Avengers are, and with his brain being the super AI, he decides they've all just gotta go. And by the end of the movie, we have a horribly damaged Sokovia with roughly 177 deaths. One of those deaths being Charles Spencer, a young American engineer killed in the final fights. Charles's mother ends up confronting Stark in Captain America Civil War, which ultimately leads to, drumroll, number 6, signing the Accords. Captain America Civil War was one of the most highly anticipated MCU movies, and it's pretty easy to figure out why. The two teams going against each other, I mean, even the poster, I was sold. The movie touches base on incidents like Charles Spencer. How many people have died because of the Avengers? I mean, sure, the whole fun is seeing somebody like Stark create this powerful villain and then use his own wit to defeat him with the help of the Avengers. But like, an asteroid basically hit Earth. I'm surprised more people didn't die in Sokovia, to be honest. So the government sees this and makes every superhero sign these accords, and Tony Stark is all on board. He wants this to happen. He's pushing it. That way the government can control what they do or where they go. So it's not their name that's on the line. And if you don't sign, you retire. That's the deal. Now, of course, some team members don't agree, like, you know, Captain America, who's all about freedom. Tony basically forced team members to sign up and go against his very own coworker, Steve Rogers. It's wild because we see both these character arcs changed in this movie for the both of them. We see Cap at the start, who wants to be this like team player and do everything by the books, you know, in Captain America, the first Avenger. And now, by his third movie, he's an outlaw because Tony Stark didn't listen to him about Bucky. Now, Stark, when we first met him, he was cocky, he was rich, he wanted to punch his way through all the problems, even spying on S.H.I.E.L.D. the second he entered the helicarrier. But now, Tony wants everybody to sign and work for the government, all because he feels bad about creating Ultron and blowing it out of the sky. If he had never signed and listened to Cap, the crazy plan of Zemos wouldn't have actually worked. The band would still be together, and when Thanos came to Earth, they all would have smoked him before he even got hands of all the Infinity Stones. Ha! Rant over. Number 5, Statue of Liability. We go now to the Incredible Hulk issue 299. So after the Avengers and everybody decided, hey, the Hulk can finally control himself, let's all be nice, let's give him a statue, reward the man. He earned it. Earth's mightiest hero, we love this guy. Yeah, he's on lunchboxes, so nice. Then in comes the villain Nightmare to ruin the day for the rest of us. So he taps into Banner's subconscious and makes him resort back to the monstrous, uncontrollable ways that he used to be. Again, kind of like when Wanda was messing with his brain in Age of Ultron. So he grabs the statue that was made for him and then just hucks it at Thor. That's hilarious. Like, hey, happy birthday, thanks. Duh. The Hulk even beats up Banner's girlfriend named Kate Waynesboro.
not to be confused with the Wayans brothers. So next time you give your friend with anger problems a statue, just make sure they can't throw it at you. And number 4, train problems. Have you ever been commuting to work and you think, oh, what's taking so damn long? Why isn't this train going anywhere? Well, in a world where these beasts exist in real life, the usual traffic jam would have most civilians' palms sweating. Like if the Avengers were real today, like in our world, I'd be afraid all the time. So many villains, so many problems all the time. Like if I heard a balloon pop in the other room, I'd be like, is it Loki? Are we good? Am I dust? What's going on? Is it happening again, please? So in the Incredible Hulk 122, Hulk has a moment where he kind of ruins an entire locomotive, yeah. He was annoyed by the sound of a passing train and does his version of a rope workout, you know, when those like guys get in the thing and they flick it? He does that, but with a train track. Causes all the cars to fly in the air, like that tablecloth trick, except when your like nephew does it and he doesn't know how to do it yet, so they all just fly off. No passengers were on the train, sure, but I mean, making it rain sidecars, I'm sure that's not the easiest thing to clean up. Number 3, Joe Not Fix-It. The Grey Hulk, aka Joe Fix-It, is one of my favorite versions of the Hulk. He's like this bouncer in Vegas, and he reminds me of a security guard that I actually used to work with in a bar. His name's Tony. He was awesome. He was like this big, old guy. He's amazing. So naturally, I like this Hulk a lot. The next point made me like him even more. He's a savage. A savage! So he sees his ex-girlfriend, Marlo Chandler, being attacked by a werewolf. So what does this giant, unstoppable monster do upon seeing this? He just stares and considers letting her get mauled. I mean, maybe he's jealous, maybe he's a little bit, I don't know. But I mean, Joe Fix-It is this tough, I don't give a shit kind of guy. I mean, come on, this is a pretty dark character arc. A little bit too much, Mr. Joe Fix-It. And number 2, Killed Tigra. Okay, yeah, this one goes pretty dark. We go now to the 1995 comic titled The Last Avengers Story. Now at this point, most of our loved heroes have gotten old and retired. Either that or they've died in battle. Not much is happening in terms of super support. So in the first issue, we find the Hulk in, of course, a fit of rage. Classic. And at one point, he gets his green mitts on Tigra and, oh baby, that's a position you don't want to be involved in. Tigra jumps in like, yeah, we're a team, haha, the Hulk, I can just claw his eyes out as easily as anybody else. And then Banner grabs her and says, hey, make a wish, and pulls her apart. Like one of those holiday finger popper snapper things where you go, yikes, make a wish. Who says that? This guy's messed. And finally, number 1, Hungry Hungry Hulk. To end this list, I thought it was fair to pick the 2002 to 2004 run of The Ultimates, where Hulk is, of course, a cannibal. Mark Miller and Brian Hitch wrote this thing so well that I actually want to see this version on screen more than like any of the latter. So after becoming the Grey Hulk, he ended up eating a bunch of people. He even encounters Iron Man and says the line, little man smells like canned meat. Hulk wanted to know if he tastes like canned meat too. Like, if he said that to me, I would my super suit. I would be like, no, I'm not dealing with this guy. You guys do it. Like, imagine if he said this in the movies. The entire theater would just sit up like, is he about to eat Tony Stank? So since the Grey Hulk incident, he's been locked up, rightfully so. But after Magneto attacks the Ultimates base, they lose power for a little. So during that time, Hulk decides the 6 nursing staff members near him served as a tasty treat. And down the hatch they went. Yum yum. Kicking off the list at number 10, left arm issues. Since Iron Man 1, Tony's left arm hasn't gotten a break. When Tony makes his first flight escaping the 10 rings, a tank shoots him out of the sky, hitting his left arm. In Iron Man 2, he gets electrocuted by whiplash and his tech shows that his left arm is in the red. It's not looking good. Iron Man 3, Tony uses snow to soothe his arm after crash landing, so it must be still hurting. In Civil War, Tony literally says to Nat, my left arm is numb, is that normal? Cut to an hour later, Tony's arm is even in more pain and now in a sling after Wanda dropped a car on it. Even in Spider-Man Homecoming, he's supporting his arm whilst giving Peter a lecture on being a superhero. Makes sense why he snapped with his right hand. Left one's probably done. He probably has no nerves left. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, this list is rather dark, so all that love and thumbs up and good vibes, sure to help us out as well. Also, those thumbs up literally help us in our studio, so thanks for your support. Let's get right back to the list. Number 9, killed by Captain America. Tony and his tech are pretty close, but in Age of X story, we see the two get a little too close for comfort. After a virus began taking its toll on Tony, he started to literally merge into his armor. That's like something from Black Mirror. That sounds horrible. He decided that a name change was also in order, so he started going by Steel Corpse, which, gotta say, looking at him is
much more fitting. He, alongside other much livelier Avengers, headed out to take down some mutants, but upon arrival in superhero fashion, they changed their mind and opted to help everybody else instead. We love a change of heart, nice. Only Tony's advanced suit wasn't exactly on board, so now we have a situation. Tony implored Cap to save them, and at that moment, there was really only one way Cap could do it. R.I.P. Tony. Number 8. Punch by Captain Marvel. Avengers Endgame showed Tony being saved by Captain Marvel when he was stuck in deep space. But in Civil War II, they aren't exactly pals. When the inhuman Ulysses Kane starts to divide the superhero community, they get off on the wrong foot. Ulysses has this ability where he can predict possible futures, and in one of those visions, he saw catastrophe. Captain Marvel wanted to act on this. We can literally see the future. What a way to have the upper hand, right? But Tony, he wasn't on board. He was concerned about the fact that nobody really knew exactly how Kane's powers were working. That was one thing, but to punish somebody else over something they may do in the future, well, it feels morally wrong. When Spider-Man and Captain America traveled to Washington to seek out a possible vision, conflict does in fact arise. It's Civil War II, you gotta remember that. So Tony gets punched so hard by Captain Marvel that he falls into a coma. Yikes. Number 7. Endgame sacrifice. Of course, the worst things that happened to MCU Tony is also one of the best things that happened to the universe. After 5 years of half the population missing, Tony agrees to work out a time heist with the remaining Avengers, and when they get back with the stones, sans Natasha, Thanos is waiting there too. Tony didn't take the stones and fly away, no, instead he snapped his own fingers and wiped out Thanos and his army. Of course, mirroring the ending of the first Iron Man film, reminding us he is in fact Iron Man. It was a great moment, but I knew Tony was gonna die. But to see him do it in this way felt so fitting. I shed a little drop of sadness in the theater, maybe a few or 5. I couldn't stop crying. Number 6. Paralyzed. Kathleen Dare made her first appearance in Marvel Comics with Iron Man issue 233. She was this fun-loving young woman who fell for Tony Stark, but unfortunately she was psychologically unstable, so that love turned into something more sinister. Later on in Iron Man 242, Kathleen shot Tony and in turn, he was paralyzed. The injury damaged Tony's spine quite a bit. He wasn't even sure if he would ever walk again. Tony Stark is quite dramatic. He likes to put on a show, we know this, and in Iron Man issue 284, he reveals his biggest trick yet. The cover shows Tony Stark laying in a casket with the text underneath reading, "The death of Anthony Stark." Huh, what? Around him are other superheroes. They're mourning the loss of their friend and fellow Avenger. Like in Avengers Endgame, everybody shows up. Even Dr. Doom, he proposes a toast in honor of a worthy opponent who has fallen. But Tony is always prepared, even after death. He had written a note to Rhodey previously, and the note mentions a key card that would give him access to the entire complex in the form of a CD. I got Tony Stark's Secrets and Big Shiny Tune 6. What are we feeling today, folks? Rhodey collects himself, puts in the CD, and clicks play. It's a dream scenario, really. Tony explains to Rhodey that the world still needs Iron Man, and then you see a suit made specifically for Rhodey. What a moment! Again, it mirrors Tony's final holograph message in the MCU, a powerful moment on screen and on page. So Rhodey was stressing. There was so much responsibility bestowed upon him, all the while he's trying to mourn the loss of a close friend. That's a loaded day. So finally, he suits up and it's a blast. Iron Man lives again. Nice. Turns out Tony wasn't actually dead at all, rather just under cryogenic stasis until a scientist sorted out those back problems. Invincible Iron Man, you don't say. Number 5, arrested. Captain America Civil War is a staple in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The story that begins to unfold in that movie is still being worked out today in the MCU with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So when Sam Wilson tried to help Steve protect Bucky from Black Panther, it ends with them being arrested. And on top of being arrested, Cap got his shield taken away and Sam's wings were also taken. So when Zemo sneaks into the compound disguised as a psychologist, the power goes out and Sam is left to face off against the Winter Soldier without any of his gear. And it doesn't last too long. In fact, none of the Avengers last too long, but Steve was thankfully able to stop him. The whole Sokovia Accords thing made it very hard for them to suit up and start blowing up the whole building. Now, without his wings, the Falcon couldn't fly and would have to catch a super soldier on feet, regular human feet. Odds are you're not going to succeed. He's actually quite great at being a sleeper agent. And he didn't succeed. Nice try, Sam. Your heart's in the right place at least, so that's cool. Number 4, Marvel Zombies. In Marvel Zombies 3, issue 2, we see Falcon and, well, he's not around for too long, thankfully.
I know this sounds weird, but hear me out. So Earth 2149 is a universe I hope to never see with my own eyes because it's terrifying. All of our heroes are zombified, they're zombies. It's gory, it's hopeless, and we're actually gonna get some sort of zombie episode for Disney's What If series coming to Disney+. So maybe we'll see this horrible version of Falcon, but hopefully not, because ooh. So Sam received a call from Nick Fury about this terrible world issue, and at this point heroes and villains have put their past aside because now it's go time. He doesn't last long in human form because when Beast and Reed Richards find a large stash of meat in Latveria, a zombie Falcon swoops in with a horde of other zombies. So Zombie Falcon returned to New York, and then when Machine Man and Jocasta arrived, all these flying zombie supers attacked, Falcon of course being one of them. Now alongside him we also have Beak, Angel, and Vulture. Falcon got a hold of Jocasta's leg, robot leg I might add, and she got payback by blasting his head off with her laser eyes. So not Sam's finest hour, that's for sure. Number 3, chased War Machine. One of the biggest holy shit moments from Captain America Civil War was when Rhodey went down at the end of the airport battle. This was a moment where the audience wasn't actually sure if he had survived or not, and to this day he's still working out his paralysis. So what happened again? Well, while Ant-Man, well rather Giant Man, distracted the rest of the gang, Captain America and Bucky Barnes had made it to the Quinjet while War Machine and Iron Man were flying behind them trying to get them to stop. So Falcon flew in to help Cap and Buck by launching missiles to distract War Machine, and when Vision shot a laser beam out of the Mind Stone, Falcon quickly reacted by tucking in his wings and free falling out of the way. But that laser had to go somewhere, and it went right through Rhodey's arc reactor. So Sam and Tony flew down as fast as they could to try and catch him, but it was no hope as Rhodey slammed into the ground. Falcon begins to apologize to Tony, but Tony doesn't say a word. He instead hits Sam with a repulsor shot. And the next we see of Sam is when he's locked up with the rest of the Avengers who chose the wrong side on the raft. Sad times. Number 2, he quit being Captain America. So back in 2015, Captain America was Sam Wilson. It was a good time, mostly. See, Steve had given him the shield, and then in the second issue of Captain America Sam Wilson, Sam got into it with shield over some leaked information that had shield creating its own version of the cosmic cube. So Sam wasn't on board with this, so he quit working for the government, and he pulled back to just instead being a friendly neighborhood Captain America. Then shield went ahead and made this new cosmic cube, Kobik, which actually made Steve Rogers young again, and his superpowers were topped off as well. So they both were working as Captain America. Now we have 2. 2 is better than 1. Isn't this glorious? This is so good. Which was great for a while, but come issue 21, the world had viewed Sam in a negative way, so he quit. He was like, yeah, f you guys, I'm out of here. He quit until the Secret Empire storyline concluded, you know, with the real Steve Rogers coming back from the cube after he defeated his evil self, all that jazz. But even afterwards, he returned the shield yet again to let Steve inspire the world himself, which is super similar to what I think is currently happening in the MCU with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because at the end of episode 1, we meet Number 1, the replacement. At the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 1, right before the credits, we see a pretty shocking announcement. We see the government announce a new symbol of hope, a new Captain America. And there he is, wearing the same suit, rocking the same shield, not Falcon. But instead a new guy, this guy named US Agent. Wyatt Russell is playing this character in the MCU. His name is John Walker, and the character first came into comics with Captain America issue 323. He actually started off opposed to Captain America. He was one of those guys who like stage fights, made himself look better, and then he took on the alias Super Patriot, and then finally he went to the new Captain America. This guy isn't the most gentle in the comics, so it may seem like a good choice for the government and how the current state of the world post-blip is. Kicking off the list at number 10. Born to Kill. Whenever it comes to superheroes and parents, origin stories usually begin on a awful note. Shang-Chi was raised to become a deadly assassin. He didn't have a choice because his father was an immortal sorcerer crime lord. In Shang-Chi's first ever comic book appearance, Special Marvel Edition issue 15, right on the cover, readers are told that although Shang-Chi is the world's most fearsome fighter, and the following pages really drive that home, Shang-Chi is faced off against 4 deadly men, but he's just walking through these guys. He's leaping over swords, he's ducking under kicks. Shang is fierce, but when he's fighting a guy with steel limbs, it doesn't even get close. Shang-Chi declares these metal mitts as useless,
seeing as, you know, they're connected to a now broken spinal cord. It's brutal. He takes out another guy by using his left foot on the right side of his face. It's quite intimidating and powerful. But that's what happens when you're taught how to break necks at the age of 4. So when he reaches that last guy, he's called a fool. He says, no matter how skillful you are, you'll never reach my master, Zhang Zhu. But Shang says, actually, you're the fool. That deadly man is in fact Number 9, his father. Yeah, sometimes your parents are evil. It happens. I mean, Gamora, Raven, the Maximoff twins, you don't pick which side you're born on, but once you realize something's not right, it's definitely your responsibility to get the hell out of there. Now, in the MCU adaptation, that's just what he did. Tony Leung plays Zhu Wenwu, the leader of the Ten Rings organization, father to Shang-Chi, and he had discovered the Ten Rings long before the MCU. He found them thousands of years before the birth of his children. These rings allowed him to win many wars, and he did so under the alias the Mandarin. Now, seeing this on the big screen was a spectacle. Watching Wenwu take over armies and single-handedly wipe out hundreds of warriors never looked so good in IMAX. I don't know how else to say it. It's beautiful. The fight choreo is so good, chef's kiss. But eventually, while searching for more land to rule and armies to best, he came across the village of Ta Lo in 1996. It was a paradise filled with mystical beasts. It was an ideal land to have, really, but it wasn't easy to find. He lost his men whilst traveling through the cursed forest, but like other roadblocks, those 10 rings made it easy for Wenwu to make it through to the forest and find the land of Ta Lo. And that's actually where he met Ying Li, aka Number 8, his mother. Ying Li was guarding the entrance to Ta Lo, but Wenwu at this point was used to this. Only when they started to fight, she displayed her own powers, and they were strong enough to finally match Wenwu's strength and durability. They fought for a bit, but ultimately they were impressed with each other's moves. And of course, they fell in love. They got married, had 2 children, Shang-Chi and Zailing. Now, this was a turning point in his many, many years of ruling, because Wenwu retired the rings at this point. He wanted to leave his extensive history in the past and just be a family man. We love a change of heart, yes, love it. But one night, while the kids were still very young, the Iron Gang returned to get revenge on the 10 rings, and Wenwu was not around at that time. Ying Li fought the gang off as long as she could, but there were just too many of them, and she sadly died protecting her children. When Wenwu returned, he would never be the same again, and neither would Shang-Chi. Before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be awesome. We love your support, it really does help us out so much, so thank you for watching and tuning in and subscribing. So hit that thumbs up and we can continue bringing content to you. You're amazing. Let's get back to this list. Number 7, first mission. In the MCU, young Shang-Chi joins his father simply to witness the brutal retaliation he inflicts upon the Iron Gang. And it feels scary at this point in the theaters. It's very intimidating. Wenwu just destroys their room. The rings are back out now in modern day. He's blocking gunshots, he's hucking tables, all the while poor Shang-Chi at a young brittle age is forced to watch. He's seeing this side of his father for the very first time. It's quite a lot. But in the comics, his first mission was much more hands-on. His first mission in the comics happens when he's an adult. Now, this is the first time he's in the real world post-training. He's sent to assassinate the most evil man alive, Dr. Petrie. He's super old, but his father refuses to let him die of natural causes. That's insane. The peace of dying at an old age in your bed, that must be denied to him, so Shang-Chi has to be the one to now do it. This next bit of dialogue is important here. He knows that he's trained to be a killer, and the only guiding light is that he thinks his father is an honorable and truthful man. So if this is what has to happen, then it must be for the greater good, right? So he gets close to the doctor's bed and he stops and he thinks for a minute. He's so old and feeble, this feels so wrong to do. The guy's 90 years old, he's in the middle of sleeping, and the guy's literally in REM. What harm could he possibly be doing at this point in his life? As he's sitting there debating all this in his head, Shang-Chi looks over and the old man opens his eyes, and that's when his training takes over and Shang-Chi just hits him once, and that's enough to end his life. On the way out, he was approached by Dr. Sir Dennis Nayland Smith. He reveals his true origins, and Nayland sets the record straight on who's really on the right side here. Number 6, the cat. So after this point, Shang-Chi had become a hero, or at least that was his intentions, which is better off than how we started. His father wasn't happy about his life choice, obviously, so he sent a number of assassins to take him out. During his travels, he met other martial artists and of course other superheroes. He also met his rival, Cat. Shen Kui made his first appearance in Master of Kung Fu issue 38. He too was a master martial artist, and now he was a formidable spy in Hong Kong. First for communist China, and then later on as a freelancer. Shang-Chi was sent to recover lost documents, investigate Cat, and a British agent named Juliet. But when Cat saw Juliet and Shang-Chi talking amongst themselves, he thought that she had revealed his whereabouts. He's skilled, perhaps too skilled, Shang-Chi thinks, because while they were kicking each other in the neck, Juliet stabbed herself just to get them to stop. Now, according to Shang-Chi, neither of them know who is more skilled skilled in martial arts. Cat is also immune to the powers of Black Mamba because he's already technically living his greatest fantasy. You love to see it. Even his villains are cool, you know? Whenever you have a hero and his like main villain is a cool guy, you're like, ah, it's tough. As far as villains go, I mean, pretty sweet that you're like directly matched. And also they're punching each other in the face. I can watch this all day. Number 5, trick shot to the heart. Dark Avengers issue 190. In the alternate Earth of 13584, we see a pocket reality where Tony has undergone a pretty drastic upgrade, if you want to call it an upgrade, of course. He's still Iron Man, only he's evil this time around. And he's also just a brain. Yeah, this is a dark future where New York is the only remaining part of civilization, so the Dark Avengers are fighting over it. When Janet Van Dyne crushes Iron Man, he ejects out of the suit, again just a brain, just rolls on out, and at that moment Clint's brother, Barty Barton, shoots right through the brain with an arrow. At least it was a quick way to go this time around. Number 4, hit by a plane. Marvel's Dark Ages arc featured a pretty rare injury for Tony to endure, considering that he can fly and he's also wrapped in metal. The timing here is just so unfortunate. The story kicks off with an earthquake. Tony tells Pepper to take cover as he tries to figure out a super solution. Shortly after, there's power cuts, classic earthquake move, so now Pepper is stuck in an elevator and Tony's distress calls aren't even going through to the Avengers. Even his suit powers down mid-flight. On the way down, Tony's flailing about when a passing plane hits him and cuts off his left foot. The plane crashes down on the ground and Tony, while losing quite a bit of blood, crashes into Stark Towers. Number 3, lost the kid. We had an idea of how Infinity War would end. We knew part 2 was a year afterwards, so we knew somebody was biting the dust. Well, half of our beloved heroes ended up turning into dust, including the young Peter Parker. Tom Holland knocked this out of the park. I don't cry in movies often, but when Peter was telling Tony that he didn't want to go, holy shit. This was Tony's final arc, moving to the woods, having a kid, just dropped the superhero life right away, and even when Scott, Steve, and Natasha showed up to offer a possible solution, Tony doesn't even want to be involved. He says he's got a second chance right here, referring to Morgan and Pepper. Losing Spider-Man, Tony felt responsible. He made the kid the suit that allowed him to even go to space in the first place, and then all of a sudden he's a pile of dust all over your lap. Yeah, that would mess me up for 5 years as well. You don't blame him. Number 2, Armor Wars. The Armor Wars series is confirmed to hit Disney Plus sometime down the road, with Don Cheadle attached to the project, so we figured we'd remind you how the comics went. It's just a blast. Armor Wars is a 7-issue series written by David Michelinie and Bob Layton. Now after Iron Man's tech was stolen, Tony was on the hunt to take down several villains using any sort of armor or tech. He's taken down anybody with armor. He even fights fellow Avenger Stingray at one point, although he's innocent. I hope we get that fun introduction in live action. That would be crisp. When Iron Man battled Firepower, he got injured so badly that he faked his own death. See, in the comics at this time, the world didn't know that Iron Man was Tony Stark. They thought it was Tony's bodyguard, a guy named Randall Pierce. So Tony ended up becoming the new Iron Man, although he took all of those punches before anonymously. And finally, number 1, Infinity Gauntlet. Just because the Infinity Gauntlet can undo things doesn't mean we can forget about them. Like that time in the comics when Iron Man got his head ripped off by Taraxia. The Infinity Gauntlet was a 6-part series that began in 1991 from the brilliant Jim Starlin and George Perez. It opens with Silver Surfer crashing down into Earth, saying that Thanos is coming. And come issue 4, the Avengers are now going to Thanos. The plan was for the Avengers to attack Thanos and his new partner, Taraxia. Meanwhile, Silver Surfer was waiting around on deck to snatch that Infinity Gauntlet. Sounds easier said than done. Thanos stops Thor's hammers with his fingertips, Wolverine's adamantium bones turn to rubber, so gross. Cyclops gets his head stuck in a clear block of force, Vision gets the life literally ripped out of him, and Iron Man gets dispatched, as Taraxia says, whilst holding Tony's head proudly. Like it's a birthday cake. She's like, here you go, Thanos, here's a head. Things get undone later on, but that one shot of everybody just laying there, it's gonna live in my head rent-free.
Number 10, getting his memories back. I mean, this is one of the worst and best things to happen to Bucky when you think about it. He pursued his memories for a long time after losing them to brainwashing, but at the same time, they gave him a pretty huge amount of guilt, as he also remembered everything he had done, the person he used to be, but also the person he was shaped into becoming, against his his will. It would often mean that we'd get a very different version of Bucky when he returned as the Winter Soldier after he remembered who he was, a much moodier version than the bright-eyed youngster who had been Captain America's confidant, pal, and sidekick. It would also mean that Bucky would often feel he wasn't worthy of certain tasks, titles, or even friendships, and that it would be hard for him to move forward and see himself as the hero that he could be. The hero he always had been before he was manipulated into being a villain that really he was not. Number 9. Died in the snap. Oh, I didn't snap. Can't snap today. This is terrible. Don't give me the gauntlet today. Admittedly, not that bad, as all the heroes who died were returned to us once more when the Avengers finally managed to discover the secrets of time travel, used it to collect the stones, and managed to reassemble a version of the gauntlet, and undid what Thanos had done. But still, dying is never really a good time, I imagine, and all the death we experienced at Infinity War was still very tragic. Also, for a while, we didn't really know if it would end up being reversed. I mean, we hoped, we guessed, we assumed, but it was still unknown as to if it would end up being possible for our heroes to bring everyone back. So of course, Bucky is now back, and after Steve traveled back in time to settle down with Peggy, live his life out with her, and basically ended up retiring, the Winter Soldier returns to the screen to team up on Disney Plus with his partner and Cap's friend besides, Falcon, aka Sam Wilson. Alright friends, before we move on to this next point, if you are enjoying this video and you want to see more videos like it and hear more cool stuff about Winter Soldier, be sure to show us you like it by giving it a thumbs up. Hey! Number 8. The death of his parents. Not only does Bucky have a tragic life following the events of World War II, but even before then, it was pretty sad. When he was only 10 years old, he found himself an orphan. His mother had died earlier on when he was younger, making Bucky not just an older brother to his sister, but also kind of a stand-in parent for her as well, with his father working most of the time to provide for the family. Later on, Bucky would lose his father too, who died in a tragic accident that took place during his basic training with the military. Bucky and his sister would ultimately be split up, and Bucky would end up convincing Camp Lehigh, where his dad had trained, to take him in as a ward of the state, with him going on to become the camp mascot, inspiring and later on even assisting the troops.
Number 7. Old Man Cap. At the end of Avengers Endgame, now that we're talking about it, we see Captain America return the Infinity Stones, only he doesn't shoot back to the present day after he's done. No, he sticks around, hangs out with Peggy, dances the night away, and then we see him as an old man giving the shield down to Sam Wilson just minutes later. It's a lovely end to Chris Evans' run on the character. You got a lot of feels. But in the comics, we also saw an old Captain America, but this time, it wasn't on his terms. The Iron Nails sucked all of Cap's serum out, leaving him not ripped, but also not young as well. So now Steve looked 90, and there's no way you're gonna fight at that age, let alone pick up a shield. So he would lead the Avengers and call out orders from the radio. It sounds like a pretty sweet job for us, but for Steve, he's probably like, man, this is the most boring job I've had in my entire life. Number 6. William Naslund. He was originally introduced in the comics as the Spirit of 76 in Invaders issue 14. William Asland also held Captain America's mantle for a brief moment. This what if comic turned out to be canon, so back after the apparent death of Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes at the end of World War II, the United States approached him to be the new Captain America. The first replacement, wow, how exciting would that be? So much pressure though. So he had the shield for a brief amount of time. He had done a couple of missions, and then he died in action. Yeah, he had to fight off these robots, and he ended up in the hands of one of them and was crushed to death. But he went down a hero. He activated a flare device that made the robot inactive, and he also summoned the other members of the All Winners to come to the rescue. So he went out a hero, short but sweet.
Number 5. Relationship with Iron Man. Back to the Ultimate Universe we go! Another awful point when it came to Black Widow's characterization in this alternate universe was that she was paired up with Tony Stark. Well, actually, it isn't even so much that part that I take issue with, but more the fact that she was manipulating him the entire time. Needless to say, this relationship did not end well for either party. As you know, Black Widow ended up being apprehended and later killed, whereas Tony was later reminded of Natasha in a very public way when a certain tape of theirs was circulated publicly. If you haven't already been able to tell, I'm not a huge fan of this part of the Ultimate Universe. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of cool things that came out of that line and came out of that world, but this is definitely not one of them for me. Number 4. Manipulated into joining the KGB. After Natasha learned her husband Alexei went missing in action, she was inspired to serve her country by his sacrifice. With Alexei being believed dead, Natasha joined the KGB and became one of their best operatives and spies. In reality, reality, Alexei was not actually dead, but the decision was made to tell Natasha that he was, separating the two after their marriage because, well, the government believed that it was in their best interest to do so when it came to utilizing both of these agents more efficiently. Which is kind of weird because I think they also kind of incentivized them to get married, so I don't know. Number 3, blackmailed into becoming a spy. Not only was Black Widow manipulated into joining the KGB, but even before that, she had actually been blackmailed into becoming a spy for her own country, who threatened her husband's life if she didn't cooperate with them. Yeah, this whole thing's pretty messed up. And that is one of the ways her life as a spy began. And I say one of the ways because, well, Black Widow's life is kind of complicated when it comes to uncovering her true origins. But this, as one of them, is a pretty tragic one. Basically, Natasha's marriage to Alexei, and even in fact, her other marriages, were one of the ways that her country manipulated her and then also controlled her, making her do their bidding. Number 2, retcons on retcons. Speaking of her convoluted origins, Black Widow is a character who has also suffered from retcons on retcons when it comes to her true origin story. Initially, we knew her as a ballerina turned spy. What a strange story. But we would later learn that her ballerina backstory was all a lie, and then in fact all her memories that she had as a ballerina were actually implanted and fake. This was all part of a plot of the Red Room to basically make Natasha believe this was her backstory and like manipulate and control her when she was really being trained by them instead. Not only does this add even more to the number of times and ways in which Natasha was manipulated, blackmailed, and brainwashed, but it also just adds to our confusion when it comes to actually trying to keep track of her backstory and getting it straight. It's like, oh, it was this, but then that was actually all fakes, and it was this, but then that was fake. Number 1, clones. One of the worst things to happen to any character, really. As if it wasn't enough, the Red Room played with Natasha's emotions and manipulated her mind more than once. They also decided to make copies of her and other agents as well. That's right, Natasha also at one point had a ton of clones made in her image. In the end, though, she destroyed the Red Room's clones of her, taking back her own persona and causing a whole lot of grief for the Red Room in the end. Thank goodness. Still, having someone clone you without your permission is pretty awful, and in my book is one of the worst things that can happen to a character. Not anti-clones just as they exist, but I'm anti-cloning, I guess.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have the power broker. John Walker looked up to his older brother Michael quite a bit, especially after he sacrificed his life serving during the Vietnam War. So John decided to follow in his brother's footsteps, and he went into the military service as well. But that still wasn't enough. John felt like he still wasn't the hero that he needed to be. He kept comparing himself to Michael, and what exactly is a hero without a few super abilities on the side, am I right? So we paid a visit to the power broker. The power broker is being teased throughout Falcon and Winter Soldier right now, but what do? Who are they? Well, they trade their knowledge of technology for high-paying customers who want to undergo this risky process to basically become a superhero. It's like a gamble to get some powers. Half the time, the clients wouldn't even survive. See, it's not that easy to become a superhero. But it worked for John Walker. Unfortunately, it enhanced his strength a hefty amount. So now we have the motivation, we have the superpowers. So what's the next step? And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. You guys are super helpful. Thank you so much for your support. Now let's fly right back into this list. Number 9, he became super patriot. Before becoming Captain America, John Walker tried the hero gig just in another fashion. First, he was the super patriot. He made a spectacular first appearance in Captain America 323, and John Walker was standing up for America and its true ideals. Nice. He even chose July 4th to make his grand entrance. What a patriot. What a super patriot. So Cap walks by as this is happening when he's making his big debut, and he sees a big poster with his face on it with a big red X through the center. It's kind of like America's Got Talent. And then on the other side, we see the super patriot with a big yes on his side. Okay, that's odd. So now he's starting to publicly shame Captain America in front of his supporters. He's trying to win over the crowd. And if a cool America monologue wasn't enough to do it, he had his own buck, the Bold Urban Commandos. There were 3 of them, and they staged attacks to make John Walker look better. But you could only look so good until number 8. Fought Captain America. So where John and his 3 Bold Urban Commandos staged another attack, Captain America arrived to save the day. And then readers get treated to a star-spangled battle. And John puts up a pretty good fight as well. He can actually go toe-to-toe with Captain America. Thanks, Power Broker.
It worked. They end up battling it out for 27 minutes straight. 27 minutes. That's like a full TV episode of just getting punched in the face. That's terrible. But Super Patriot was never able to really land a blow on Cap, and Cap was never able to keep Super Patriot down. So they're just standing there out of breath for 27 minutes like, now what? So Super Patriot leaves before doing the worst thing ever in all of this. He calls Steve a loser, and then he runs away. Number 7, no rules. Captain America 332, the villain Warhead drops in via parachute with a message. Make war some more. Signed, Warhead. You know, in case we confused them with somebody else falling from the skies. He set up a table on top of the Washington Monument, and then he pulled out a nuclear device. So it's not looking like a good situation at all. Perfect time for a hero like Super Patriot. Yeah, he came in and used his powers and saved the day, proving that he can indeed be worthy of the hero life. Well, he tried to, but it didn't go as well as he planned. He climbed up the side, up to Warhead and his well-balanced table, and then he started hucking throwing stars at him at first. He hit him in the face a couple times. And then when that didn't work and he was close enough, he just grabbed the table and threw it into a diving board of doom and just hucked this guy right off into the skies. And he did not survive the fall at all. I mean, you could have handled this in literally any other way. You have superpowers. Come on, use your head. Number 6, became Captain America. One of the biggest game changers in the MCU was when John Walker came out at the end of the episode, winked at the camera, and then showed us his brand new Captain America suit in the meantime. This happened, of course, in the comics as well, when Steve Rogers had to abandon his identity due to the Red Skull's manipulation of the Commission on Superhuman Activities. So now somebody has to suit up, somebody has to take his spot. The government needed a new figure. So in issue 333 of Captain America, it was titled The Replacement. The government's weighing their options on who should be the next to lead the nation, so they go with the guy who just launched a dude off of a building. Awesome, John Walker just got the promotion of a lifetime, and now we're all screwed.
Number 5, Spider or Man. So Peter has grown extra arms before, but I don't think anything was worse than his transformation in the spectacular Spider-Man disassembled storyline. Adriana Soria, aka the Spider Queen, saw Spider-Man as a potential mate, of course, so she forced a kiss upon Parker, and after some time passed, he began turning into a literal spider. So gross. Starting with growing an extra set of eyes, it's kind of funny. Peter can feel himself change as well during this, which is pretty, dare I say, humorous at times, because this dude is now craving fly soup, and he's growing bristle hair in places you don't want to grow bristle hair. The best part is that MJ still makes this guy go to a wedding despite his transformations. He doesn't stick around too long, obviously, because he starts to panic and change even more, so now he's just swinging around the city, not even sure what he's doing. He can't think or breathe, but he knows that the Queen is calling him. His body starts to then change even more until eventually he's, a literal human spider. MJ's like, hey, you're fine, it's an open bar. What could go wrong? Let's go dance. Number 4, an eye for an eye. In Spider-Man The Other, Evolve or Die, Part 6 features a specific injury to Parker that lives in my head rent-free. Part 6, The Reckoning, kicks off with Morlun and Spider-Man going at it. They fight on the roof of the Bugle, and then eventually they crash inside the actual office. It's pretty exciting. Peter tries to take the fight elsewhere, as there's too many innocent people around, like say, I don't know, Peter's boss, for example. Peter is trying everything, and Morlun isn't even breaking a sweat. Morlun then yanks out Peter's left eye right out of the socket, and then to make us feel even more sick, he eats it like a cherry tomato. Yum. Number 3, Kraven's Last Hunt. Released back in 1987, Kraven's Last Hunt is one of the best Spider-Man stories to this day. The 6-parter begins with Kraven shooting Spider-Man with a tranquilizer and then burying him alive. Now, if that already didn't sound horrible enough, Kraven suited up as the Webhead and became a better version of Spider-Man. Yeah, his version would save the day by brutally attacking criminals with the help of Vermin as a creepy sidekick. 2 weeks go by before Peter wakes up underground. He then chases down Kraven, but after Vermin almost takes Peter out, Kraven reveals that his hunting days are since done. While Peter chases down Vermin, Kraven literally retires. This guy goes home, he leaves a confession tape that he buried Spider-Man and took the suit, all that jazz, and then Kraven takes his own life. It's bizarre, but once you start this story, it's quite literally impossible to put down. Number 2, Gwen Stacy. This one we saw on screen in 2014, and honestly, I don't care how you felt about the Andrew Garfield movies, this scene slapped. It was wild. My throat was so tight, like the last time I cried in a movie theater was probably Bridge to Terabithia and then The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
I'm being honest. I'm opening up to you guys. The Amazing Spider-Man issue 121 and 122 are titled Turning Point and The Goblin's Last Stand. These issues shocked readers. At this point in the comics, Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, had forgotten who Spider-Man really was due to amnesia. Meanwhile, his son Harry was not in great shape as well. He was undergoing detoxification. He was having some substance abuse issues, so Norman was now stressing hard. Financial problems, family problems. He eventually had a mental breakdown, and all of a sudden he remembered his dark goblin side. And also he remembered who Spider-Man really was. His first target was Gwen Stacy. You gotta attack the heart, right? Peter meets them on top of the Brooklyn Bridge. He throws his hardest hits, but when Gwen is thrown over the side of the bridge, Peter can't catch her at the right angle, and in turn, her neck snaps because of the falling momentum. It's shocked readers and it shocked viewers. Like I said, a lot of tightness in the throat. Number 1, Peter's death. Moving on over to the Ultimate Comics, the death of Spider-Man is obviously one of the bigger ones on this list. So when Peter gets a call from MJ saying that Norman has escaped prison, he knows his family is at risk. And this was also happening while the New Ultimates and the Ultimate Avengers were going at it. So while Peter was trying to handle his own problems, he saw that the Punisher was taking aim at Captain America. So he jumped in the way, being a hero, and literally took a bullet for him. As if that wasn't already a rough night, Osborn and the crew are now gearing up to take the battle to Peter's front steps. Peter barely holds on during this fight. He's asking bystanders to call 911. He's not feeling great at all. And come issue 160, the Goblin lays one final blow, and that's the last we see of Ultimate Peter Parker.
Number 10, Abandoned by Stick. Really, Matt's story, as you're going to find out, is all about loss, tragedy, and grief. While there's a lot of ups for Matt Murdock, there's also been a lot of downs. One such high he rode was being trained by his master Stick, who began training him after the accident where he lost his sight, but had all other senses heightened as a result. However, shortly after his father's death, Stick too would leave Matt, and at a time when Matt really needed him too. Matt had tracked down the last man involved in his father's death. A masked Matt attacked him, but found himself overwhelmed by the women who worked there, who seemed to take out all their worldly rage on him, attacking him in kind. In the scuffle, he accidentally pushed one of them with enough force to send her crashing and falling out of a window. She would live, but the incident would awaken other personas living deep within her. This woman would become Daredevil's villain and sometimes love interest, Typhoid Mary. Matt at the time, however, believed he'd killed the woman and ran back to the gym in search of Stick. But Stick was gone. He had abandoned Matt because of what he'd done. Ouch. Sucks. Number 9, getting involved with Typhoid Mary. Typhoid Mary wasn't just a person that Daredevil hurt, she'd also become a recurring love interest of his, on and off. And honestly, the moment where he accidentally pushed her out of a window could be considered one of the worst moments of his life, for how much grief Typhoid Mary would cause in his life both as an enemy and as a lover. Typhoid Mary suffers from a dissociative personality disorder, meaning she has personalities that reside within her that are more calm or sweet, but then there are of course also sides to her that are more violent or deadly, and each one is literally their own personality, separate from the other. Typically, the persona of Mary is her sweeter side, Typhoid Mary is her more villainous one, and Bloody Mary is probably the most violent, hate-filled, and unhinged personality of hers. However, it should be noted that while Typhoid Mary is one of the worst people to get involved with Matt, he was also likely one of the worst things in her adult life, at least, to have happened to her, with him re-triggering her split personalities to resurface. Although it wasn't him initially that caused the split, at least. That was trauma from her past. Some really intense trauma, to be real about that. And friends, before I move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more Daredevil lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, his mother's fate. Not the fact that she became a nun, but more what caused her to leave her family. Later on, we would learn that Matt's mom, Maggie, had abandoned her children due to experiencing severe depression following their birth. As a result of her depression, she also became obsessed with Matt's safety and paranoid that her husband was plotting against her. One night, she became so distraught and confused by her depression that she tried to do harm to young Matt. Jack stopped her, but Maggie was overwhelmed with fear. Terrified, she felt the best course of action was to leave her family so she couldn't do any harm to any of them. She left, became a nun, and even after she recovered from her mental illness, did not return, leaving Matt to grow up without his mother, led to believe by his father that his mother had died when he was very young. Matt would not learn until much later in his life what had really happened to her. Number 7. The death of his father. Let's go back to Daredevil's origins. Right off the bat, life was pretty tough for Matt, starting out as a hero. His dad was Jack Murdock, who was a boxer, and always had dreamed of a better life for his son. And while Matt would go on to have a pretty good life, becoming a lawyer, Jack wouldn't be around to see it. Jack Murdock was killed after he refused to take a dive in a rigged boxing match. The fixer, Roscoe Sweeney, had been the one to order the hit, as he was the boxing organizer who worked with Jack and had ordered him to throw that match. Daredevil would pursue the fixer, attempting to get revenge for his father's death, but Sweeney would die of a heart attack during the chase. Number 6. Secret identity exposed. One of the worst things to have happened to Matt, multiple times really at this point, is having his identity revealed. There are a few instances where this happened prior to Kingpin even learning of his identity through information that Matt's ex at the time, Karen Page, sold him, but I would still say that the reveal to Kingpin was still probably one of the worst. Also, to be clear, Karen Page I don't think explicitly sold that information to Kingpin. She sold the information and then it ended up in Kingpin's hands. Kingpin used the information that he got to make Matt's life a living hell, ruining his civilian life, leaving Matt destitute, with even his reputation as Daredevil and even his costume left in shambles. It really was a rough time just all around.
Number 5. Buck upgrade. So now he's got a brand new suit, he's got the best frisbee of all time, but what else does John Walker need? Well, how about some backup for starters? He brings back the bold urban commandos who I mentioned earlier. The Buckies, as they're referred to, wore Captain America masks, boots, pants, but they were topless for some reason. I don't know, maybe they were into wrestling growing up. John's right-hand man, Lamar Hoskins, has been by John's side since the military, so he was obviously asked to be the main sidekick, who we also got to meet in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And he stood tall on the front cover of Captain America issue 334, and now he goes by the name Battlestar. The other two guys also got a cool upgrade. Now they're referred to as left and right winger. They were cool until they revealed John's identity to the public, and then they were kind of not cool. Left winger and right winger tried to use John's old Super Patriot tech against him, but they were eventually beaten down and arrested. So now with his identity out and about, it was only time for John to take on another super alias. This time, number 4, becoming US agent. He's back again. One of his more stylish looks, if you ask me, but John Walker returns, this time with a blacked out Captain America suit, and the shield is also less spangly. He comes back and he's put to the test. He's forced to battle an Ironmonger, and when he goes to take it down alone, the shield actually seems to work out pretty well for him. Because in the comics, it was actually Taskmaster who trained him how to use that shield in the first place. And judging by the trailers for Black Widow, because we still have to watch those until it's released, it looks like Taskmaster can throw a frisbee quite well. Number 3. He joined the Avengers. In West Coast Avengers issue 45, when Hawkeye sets up a team, well, on the West Coast, the government wanted an official in there to make sure all was going well. So funny enough, at this time in the comics, Vision was also trying to get government clearance again, so they sent in US agent. This led to John rescuing his former partner, Battlestar, from the power broker, so now this guy has his buddy back, and he's part of the Avengers. That's a pretty risky spot to put John Walker. I hope we never see him join the Avengers on the big screen, but seeing White Vision in the mix now kind of makes me nervous. Maybe the West Coast Avengers will happen, maybe, just maybe. Number 2, he joined the Force Works. After the West Coast Avengers fell apart, because naturally that's what happens when John Walker is part of the team, the costume and the shield were tossed to the side. So Tony Stark put together an all-new team known as Force Works. Scarlet Witch talked John Walker into joining the team because she honestly believed that John was the backbone to the entire squad. She kind of liked how he would run things. So he planned on running the team on tight military lines and the values of strength and dedication. So John joined the team and he wore a fancy new suit with an upgraded shield. This time it was an energy shield. John remained a member and went against the Kree, the Scatter, and the Mandarin. He was doing an alright job until he reverted back to his old ways. One mission had Force Works team up with the Avengers, and that wasn't a pleasant reunion. John Walker went into conflict with War Machine and Hawkeye, so he had to quit the Force Works as well. God, you can't put this guy anywhere. And last but not least, number 1, he took the serum. In the emotional ending of episode 4 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we find out what John Walker did to the remaining vial of the super soldier serum. He took it. Yeah. Zemo broke most of them except for one. John talked it over with Lamar Hoskins about if he would take the serum if presented the opportunity. So when Walker he does in fact take it, and it's shown to us in a pretty brutal way. While looking for Lamar, Walker reunited with Sam, and then they were all ambushed by the Flag Smashers, Nico and Dovik included. Now, Nico held back Walker for a moment, just long enough that Carly Morgenthau would attack Walker. Now, luckily, Lamar got in the way, and then that's when Carly accidentally delivered a fatal blow to Lamar. And this caused John Walker to lash out, and it's pretty bad. He can't control himself at this point. The serum has made him powerful and even more insane. And when he's attacking Nico in the heat of the moment, he goes a little bit too far. Poor Nico. This was the same episode where he told Carly that he was actually a Captain America fan growing up. So, double oof.
Number 10 is childhood. Superheroes usually don't have an easy childhood. Either they're bullied, they're born with advanced abilities that make them an outcast or a threat, or something traumatic happens with their parents. And in the case of Sam Wilson, he grew up in a tough neighborhood in Harlem, and his father Paul was a minister and tragically met his fate one night after trying to stop a fight between two gangs. Sam was only 9 years old when this happened, and soon after, his mother Darlene was attacked by a mugger, and she didn't make it. She passed away protecting her children. Sam, being so young and vulnerable, struggled with his parents passing, and his path hasn't always been that of a hero's path, because before he became the Falcon, he became... Guys, before we continue on to number 9 on our list, we just want to say thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't done so already, if you could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, because it really does help us out on our channel quite a bit. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now back to some more Sam Wilson. Number 9. Snap Wilson. So after the death of his parents, Sam figured the next move would be to dip down into the criminal life. He was angry, he was upset. This was probably what I would have done. So he went by the name of Snap Wilson, and long ago in the comics, there was a Captain America and Falcon issue that said, "Revealed at last, the true facts behind the origin of the Falcon." And then it says, "Today, Falcon slays Captain America at the command of the Red Skull." What? So this history with Sam being a hustler was retconned so that the Red Skull had in fact used the Cosmic Cube in order to make Sam a criminal turned into Captain. Now, it was apparently part of Red Skull's plan to use Falcon against Steve when the time was right down the road. Now, later on in Captain America issue 276, this retcon was cleared up even more when Sarah refers back to Snap Wilson yet again. She goes on to explain in that issue that it was all over the newspapers back when the Red Skull used Sam against Captain America. So many writers throughout many of these years of comics actually wanted to retcon the whole Snap Wilson phase, appropriately so. Number 8, the other Snap. I mean, turning into dust and vanishing for 5 years, that's probably gotta suck. Now, of course, we have to mention Infinity War on this list. So when Thanos had all of the stones but one, everybody made a last effort to stop the Mad Titan, but it just wasn't enough power. Falcon tried to stop him by shooting his twin guns at him, but Thanos used the Space Stone on him to knock him out of the air onto the ground. Ouch. And then Thanos then gave each and every other Avenger a piece of pain, with Vision of course being last, having his Mind Stone pulled out of his forehead. And after he obtained all of the Infinity Stones, it just got worse. Falcon turned into ashes while he was crawling through the grass of Wakanda, and while he was fading out of existence, Rhodey was seen not too far behind him, calling out Sam's name. So sad. I was so happy when he came back, but like, man, having that be the last that we saw of all these heroes for a whole year, that wasn't easy on my emotions. Number 7, Tony Stark's death. With rumors swirling around about the next Spider-Man movie being one within the multiverse, it's only fair to go back and look at some of the sad themes of Spider-Man Far From Home, with of course being the death of Tony Stark. So right off the bat, we see Peter struggling with the weight of the world, having everybody look at him as the new leading Avenger. With most of our other Avengers off-world, Spider-Man facing Mysterio couldn't have been more grueling. This poor kid even gets slammed by a train at one point. It's easy to say this is a time where Peter could for sure go without. Reconnecting with lost friends, dealing with much older classmates like bad boy Brad, who doesn't make the first year back in school easy for Peter at all. That plus Tony Stark's inventory just being handed off to him, that's a lot of responsibility. The kid's going through a lot of pressure, and puberty too. I mean, probably. What a combo. And number 6, the affair. Gwen and Norman's affair, to be specific. This is an absolute nightmare of an issue, so of course we're throwing it in here. We go now to Since Past, which was this 5-part story that revealed that Gwen Stacy had actually had an affair with Norman Osborn. And they had kids named Gabriel and Sarah.
So he meets them in a pretty wild way. We're introduced to these two twin characters, these new mysterious characters, and one of them really resembles Gwen Stacy, like by a lot. So Spider-Man 509, this begins, and it starts with a letter from a dead Gwen Stacy. So Peter starts to analyze the situation and the letter, and eventually finds out the secret that even Mary Jane knew about. So 7 months before Gwen's death, she gave birth to these twins with Norman. But because of Norman's blood, they aged a lot faster. And this wasn't taken too well by comic book fans, as this was written out pretty fast. Still an awful time for Peter, I'd say. I mean, even Mary Jane knew about it the whole time. So many secrets, so little time.
Number 5, having Magneto for a father. At least for the time she did. While in the comics, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are no longer considered the children of Magneto, they still had him as a father for many years, and across many alternate Earths as well. While Magneto might be good with magnetizing, he is not very good at parenting. Magneto is usually a pretty strict father who has demanded much from his children over the years. I think Wanda, in terms of having a caring parent, was actually better off with her sentient cow mom that the High Evolutionary created. Number 4, spell backfire. Even when Wanda tries to do good, she can't catch a break. In the X-Men Empire series tie-in, Scarlet Witch seeks to right her wrongs by bringing back all those mutants lost in the massacre at Genosha. She is trying to atone for her past and all the harm that she has brought to mutant kind. But poor Wanda can't seem to catch a break. Her ritual to revive the dead backfires and instead simply turns those that she's trying to bring back into zombie mutants, instead of bringing them, fully back to life. To make matters worse, we later find out that Doctor Strange warned her against trying to make amends for her sins this way, telling her she couldn't do what had already been done. This made Wanda think that she simply needed to shift her focus instead of realizing that she needed to actually forge new paths as opposed to undoing old tragedies. Number 3, Vision's death. Going back to the MCU for a moment, one of the worst things that happened to Elizabeth Olsen's Scarlet Witch was the death of Ultron in Infinity War. Wanda had to kill her synthezoid lover herself after Thanos showed up to attack Wakanda during an attempted procedure to safely remove the Mind Stone from Vision, attempted by Black Panther's brilliant sister, the Princess Shuri. As the procedure was cut short and everyone was pulled into the fray, Thanos was on his way to claim that stone when Viz asked Wanda to destroy it, and by extension, destroy him. She initially refused, but reluctantly agreed when Viz pressed her and insisted that she wouldn't and couldn't hurt him with her powers, and that all he felt when she used them on him was her. No pain, just her. Aw, so cute. Through tears, Scarlet Witch used her powers to destroy the stone, only to watch Thanos show up and use the Time Stone to rewind time, bring Vision back to life, so that he could destroy him by ripping the Mind Stone out of his head very painfully. Yikes. Number 2, possessed by Chthon. This is one of those times that Wanda was made a villain truly without any of her own intent steering her there. Wanda was actually marked by Chthon at birth to act as the Elder God's vessel, should he find a way to return. Chthon would actually succeed in possessing Wanda and using her to return on more than one occasion, though the first time around was probably the worst, when Mordred summoned Chthon via a ritual, allowing the god to basically take hold of Wanda and leaving the Avengers powerless against his will. Fortunately, the disaster that would be Chthon's return was averted before the ritual could be fully completed. Thank goodness for dolls with parts of Wanda's soul in them. That's what happened. Number 1, losing her children. If you were to ask Wanda what one of the worst things that ever happened to her was, I'm sure she would likely answer the loss of her children. Although she would get her 2 twin boys, Billy and Tommy, back when their souls were basically reborn into our world, reincarnating them, she would never really get back the family that she had initially willed into existence. Using her power and from her desire, Wanda made it possible for her and Vision to have children together, and Wanda gave birth to 2 twin boys. However, when others learned that they weren't real and that their existence was kind of making reality unstable, they forced Scarlet Witch to confront the truth, temporarily destroying or displacing her children, since they weren't really fully destroyed because they kind of did come back, but just in a really weird comic book way. Number 10, Stan Lee's ire. Initially, Vision wasn't loved by all at Marvel's offices. In fact, Marvel legend Stan Lee hated the look and the name of the character apparently when he was first created in 1968 by John Buscema and Roy Thomas. Apparently, Stan complained to Roy about the choice of color for the android, not liking the look of his bright red appearance, and also felt the name was not a good fit, not strong enough for the character. Today, his appearance has become iconic, and we think nothing of it. But back when he was first created, it wasn't just with comic book characters that his existence was considered controversial. Number 9. Death of his first creator. Despite the fact that we often attribute Vision's existence to Ultron, he wasn't the only one involved in his creation process. And no, I'm not talking about Tony Stark here. Professor Phineas Horton was forcefully recruited by Ultron into helping him create the synthezoid we later came to know as the Vision. Vision, in fact, was originally given the memories of Professor Horton's previous android creation, which brought on the rage of Ultron, who had specifically told Horton to wipe those memories. He's like, you do it or you're dead. And Horton was like, we'll see. Ultron, of course, did kill the professor, though, creating probably one of the first tragic moments in Vision's life to come about. At the time, the synthezoid mourned the life of his creator and swore to get revenge on Ultron. And before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder, if you are enjoying this video and you want more like it, talking about Wanda or Vision or both of them together, oh, romantic moments, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out on the channel. Number 8, no sense of normalcy. Despite the fact that he might seem cold and seems to embrace his synthetic nature, Vision actually constantly strives to fit in. When Wanda and Vision first got married in the comics, they both sought to find normalcy together by settling down in a suburban neighborhood. Oh, it's so nice. Similar to what we've seen the couple attempt in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the Disney Plus show WandaVision. Yeah, if you like WandaVision and you want to sort of read more things that maybe have inspired it, this is a miniseries you're going to want to read. The two of them, however, it seems were never fated to have a normal life, and try as they might, strange events always seemed to disrupt their attempts and lurk around every single corner. For an example of what I'm talking about, you need not look further than the first issue of their miniseries together from the 80s, The Vision and Scarlet Witch. Seriously though, check out this miniseries. On Halloween, a quiet night in quickly turns into something out of a nightmare, ending with a visit from Scarlet Witch's often villainous then-father, Magneto. So it becomes more of a nightmare, I imagine. Number 7, being controlled. The smallest spoilers ahead for WandaVision if you know nothing about it, but mostly this part is pretty safe as we'll just be focusing kind of on the premise of the show and what we know of it so far based on what has been implied in the episodes. So it's more of like a, if you know the show, you probably know this. In WandaVision, it's implied that Scarlet Witch, Wanda herself, is in complete control of everything going on in Westview, including Vision's appearance and existence there. After all, as we talked about before, Vision's appearance there likely means that Wanda manipulated him and brought him back to life, possibly even reanimating his lifeless corpse. Yikes. As the show unfolds, Vision becomes more suspicious of his life in Westview and Wanda and her involvement not just in it, but in manipulating it as well with her reality-altering powers. Also, I never noticed this before, but Westview's name actually seems to be a reference to the initial of the main characters of the show and the show title itself. Westview, WV. WandaVision, WV. Interesting. Also, it's weird that it took me so long to notice that, but I just noticed it today, so I was looking for all kinds of other explanations as to what Westview meant. I never thought about, like, the initials. Number 6, from the Torch to Wonder Man. The first Human Torch was not actually Johnny Storm, but was an android created by Professor Phineas Horton himself. Ultron, wanting to make his own such creation, kidnapped the professor and forced him to build an android being for Ultron's own purposes, which we talked about a little bit earlier. The professor, of course, modeled the synthezoid after his own creation, but a little too closely for Ultron's liking, as I said, bestowing the Human Torch's memories as well to the creation we'd later come to know as Vision. Brought to life, this being attacked Ultron, who had killed the professor as punishment for his betrayal. Unfortunately, Torch Vision, this version of Vision, was no match for Ultron, and in the end he actually ended up being reprogrammed by Ultron to follow his orders and was given the brain patterns of Wonder Man. Nothing against Wonder Man, by the way, but sharing brain patterns with that hero would cause lots of weirdness for Vision and for Scarlet Witch as well later on down the line. I feel like if you get to pick who you want to share brain patterns with, Wonder Man's not at the top of the list. Also, it's really weird that like Wonder Man's brain patterns were just lying around Hank Pym's lab in like a little recorder device. It's like, why did you have those, Hank Pym? What's going on?
Number 5.
Doc Swap. This is a body swapping story that might make you pretty uncomfortable. So we go now to the Amazing Spider-Man 700, where we find a dying Dr. Otto Octavius. So Octavius switches bodies with Spider-Man, so that Spider-Man would die in his body and then he would live on inside the body of a superhero and do some good. Not a bad plan. Now the best part of this is that Peter was still inside, a little bit. He was able to remain inside the body and could only communicate with the new webhead, Otto Octavius. It's like your subconscious just talking to you the whole time. It was pretty neat to see this version of Spider-Man as well. And after a few minutes with the new, younger, healthier body, donned himself the new name, the Superior Spider-Man. And number 4, parents are back? Yeah, this one's pretty neat. So right off the cover of this, we see the text, "The most cataclysmic events of Spider-Man's life begins in this issue." And that's probably enough to pull you into the issue. I mean, come on. So we find out that Peter's parents have returned from the dead. So in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 365, we meet them again. Peter comes home and Aunt May's like, hey, I'm here with our new guests. And Peter's like, oh, new guests, those are always fun. Are those my parents? Yes, Peter's parents had returned from the dead. Well, rather they had never died to begin with. Let me explain. So they went on to explain how they were alive and working for Red Skull in secret for years. Only it was later revealed that they were evil androids the whole time. So his robo-parents were actually collecting some intel about Peter to give back to Chameleon. Chameleon created these fake parents for Green Goblin. So many lies. Just a web of lies. Spider-Man web of lies. Now we get it. And number 3. Gwen Stacy's death. This one left average moviegoers stunned in theaters when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 hit the big screen. We finally see the death of Gwen Stacy, and it's beautiful. So of course this comes from the comics, specifically in issue 121 of The Amazing Spider-Man. The Green Goblin ends up dropping her off the Brooklyn Bridge, and although Peter has his trusty webs, sometimes the angle just doesn't quite work out, and Gwen's neck ended up snapping from the momentum. So this happened in the movie as well, and Eagle Eye fans could spot the clock tower in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 striking 12:10, which references issue 121. And the way the web shot out like a hand too, I mean, really? Right in the heart. This scene's amazing. I mean, of course it's really sad, but the music, the way it's shot, really drives this part home. I mean, it's sad that this scene was one of the last ones we got from Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man run. Sure, the movies weren't as good as the new installments, but it would have been nice to see where this Spider-Man went after this dark moment. Would have been pretty dark. We'll never know. I mean, maybe multiverse stuff. We'll see. And number 2, identity not so secret. If you stuck around until the very end of Spider-Man Far From Home, you were treated to a pretty sweet teaser. So of course we see J.K. Simmons reprise his role of J. Jonah Jameson in what starts out as a pretty comical scene. Now of course we're happy to see him back in this Spider-Man universe, but he comes bearing bad news. He ends up showing leaked footage from the final battle with Mysterio, and in the footage we see him shout out Spider-Man by his secret identity, Peter Parker, and a nice little photo to go along with it too. Now this isn't the first time this has happened. Back in the comics before the Civil War storyline, Peter takes a page out of Tony's book and reveals his secret identity to the world. And after that, things go south quite fast, including a hired gun setting his aim on Aunt May. And finally, number 1, you guessed it, Uncle Ben's death. Of course we have to include this in the list and save it for last. We had to sit through this in theaters like numerous times. And that's for good reason. One of the biggest moments of Peter Parker's life was when his Uncle Ben died. Now, after letting a thug out of his sights, that thug ended up being the one to take his uncle's life. So not only did Peter, of course, feel saddened by this very close loss, especially not having parents to begin with, but he was responsible for letting this guy get away. He honestly let it happen, and then in Amazing Fantasy issue 15, we see it all unfold. So after a police officer asks Spider-Man why he let the crook get in an elevator and make a break for it, Spider-Man responds with, "Sorry pal, that's your job. I'm through being pushed around by anyone. From now on, I just look out for number 1, and that means me." And cut to bam.